All right, so we have been called to order at 5:02. NVUSD Board of Education is holding a regular virtual board meeting tonight that all can participate in remotely. You can join via Zoom. Specific directions on how to participate are located on the Board of Education webpage on the district's website, nvusd.org/board. The open session part of this meeting agenda begins at 7 p.m. Public comment on closed session items. Before going into closed session, the board is available for public comment on closed session agenda items. Is there any public comment on closed session items?
There are no public comments for open session items.
Okay, thank you. Seeing that there are none, the Napa Valley Unified School District will now adjourn and into closed session. Okay, we are all present. So I will open our virtual meeting. We are now reconvening to open session at 7:05. Good evening, my name is Isela Martin, and this is the Napa Valley Unified School District Board of Education. The NVUSD Board of Education is holding a regular virtual board meeting tonight that all can participate in remotely. You can join via Zoom. Specific directions on how to participate in the meeting are located on the Board of Education webpage on the district's website, nvusd.org/board. Can we please start with an attendance roll call from Vera Morales?
Yes. Trustee Martin?
Here.
Trustee Gonzalez Mares?
Here.
Trustee Jankowicz?
Present.
Trustee Water?
Here.
Trustee Hurtado?
Present.
Trustee Shock?
Here.
Trustee Gracia?
Present.
Quorum present. Thank you.
Thank you, Vera. Thank you all for joining us tonight in our virtual Napa Valley Unified School District Board meeting held exclusively online. We continue in uncharted territory as we deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. I would like to thank our employees, our families, and the entire NVUSD community on how we have supported each other. And I'm going to continue saying that even though it's a script, by the way. And how we have supported each other and come together during these times. This meeting tonight is in accordance with the open meeting rules in the state of California per the governor's order. I'm going to start tonight with some basic instructions on how we're going to be using Zoom and involve the members of the community. All Board of Trustees and the Superintendent are on video throughout the entire board meeting. Staff members are also present, but by audio only. Members of the community will not be on video and will be muted except during public comment. During public comment, any member of the community that wishes to speak must raise their hand using the raise hand feature in Zoom. You will be unmuted and you will be provided 3 minutes to speak. There are 2 ways to make public comment with the time allotted for public comment on eligible agenda items. To comment by video conference, click raise your hand button to request to speak when public comment is being taken on eligible agenda items. When it is your turn to speak and your name will be called out. You will then be unmuted during your turn and allowed to make public comments. After the allotted time, you will then be remuted. Instructions on how to raise your hand are available on the district website at nvusd.org/board. To comment by phone, you will be prompted to raise your hand by pressing *9 to request to speak when public comment is being taken on eligible agenda items. When it's your turn to speak, the last 4 digits of your phone number will be called out. You will then be unmuted during your turn and allowed to make public comment. After the allotted time, you will then be remuted. Instructions on how to raise your hand by phone are available on the district website, nvusd.org/board. In addition, community members were allowed to submit comments via email at publiccomment@nvusd.org up until 8 a.m. this morning. Any comments received via email will also be read into the public record. Spanish translation is available. Did you want me to say, or were they going to translate, Dr. Massetti?
Yes, we have Ms. Vanessa Cardenas is on the other channel. Vanessa, would you like to let everyone know about the translation and joining you on the Spanish channel?
I will be interpreting for your Spanish audience. So I'm glad to be here of service to you all.
Can you let them know in Spanish, Vanessa?
I'm sorry?
Can you let the community know in Spanish that you're available for interpretation in case they're on the English channel currently?
Oh, of course. Buenas tardes a todos los que están aquí presentes. Yo seré la intérprete para las personas que prefieren escuchar y entender todo en español. Mi nombre es Vanessa Cárdenas y aquí estoy para poderles interpretar todo lo que se diga en la junta.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much. For each agenda item, I will prompt the meeting participants who have joined us via Zoom for public comment. Please follow the instructions just provided when you would like to comment on an item. Before we begin, I would like to thank everyone for their continued patience as we navigate, again, this wonderful Zoom technology. We have been called to order and have conducted our attendance roll call. We will go forward with our agenda. Now we will have a report on closed session items by Trustee Banquets.
Personnel. In closed session, the board took action to approve the following staff recommendations. Effective July 1st, 2020, the following administrative appointments have been made. Julie Chesson to the position of Director 1, Nutrition, and Sally Zickman to the position of Interim Principal for Vichy Elementary. In addition, the board approved payment of Scott Rafferty's fee claim as set forth in his June 12th, 2020 letter. The board unanimously approved. That is my report.
Thank you. Okay, we will move forward to the flag salute. David, would you like to lead us in the flag salute, please?
Certainly, I'd be happy to. Everyone, please rise. Yeah, with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag. Wait, where's our flag? There we go. All right. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so thank you, David. This meeting is recorded for live streaming via Zoom and archived on the district's YouTube channel. So I will approval of the agenda, E4, sorry. Before I approve the agenda, I'd like to make a change, please. And I would like to move item I2A in front of I1A.
So moved.
Second.
I have a first by Ms. Elba Gonzalez Mares and a second by Mr. David Gracia. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Abstentions? Nays? Motion carries. Okay. Approval of minutes, E5. That is May 28th and June 11th, 2020.
Since I think we were both there for both, I'll move to approve the minutes of both May 28th and June 11th.
Second.
Okay, first by Mr. Joe Chunka, second by Mr. David Gracia. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Nays? Abstention? Motion carries. Okay, thank you. Okay. Public comments on non-agenda items. So I will ask Julie if she will read comments from emails. If there are any.
There were no emails for non-agenda items.
Actually, one modification to that. Thank you very much, Ms. Prezi. I did commit to a submitter of public comment who just didn't go quite through the email, but I did have exchanges with them today. So I do, just for the record, want to let everybody know that on Thursday, June 11th at 12:48 p.m., Mr. Ron Ron Rhino from Napa Valley College did send a letter to the board regarding the legacy project. The subject was the legacy project, transformative learning for transformed outcomes. And so I'd just like that to be known for the record, since he did miss the deadline for the last board meeting, and I committed to letting it be known that that was received by the board.
Okay, thank you. Members of the audience may address the board on any school-related matter that is not on the agenda. The board will not take action on any issue raised during this section of the agenda, in as much as board action is limited to the posted agenda items. Speakers are requested to limit their comments to a maximum of 3 minutes, and that is a firm 3 minutes, please. Thank you. Are there any public comments?
Yes, President Martin, there is Larry Trumatola. Go ahead, Larry.
Mr. Ruiz, Mr. Tramatola is here as a presenter, so he needs to be over, he'll be moved over to panelist. He's doing presentation later in the agenda.
So promote him to panelist, Dr. Musetti?
Yes, please.
Okay.
In the agenda.
There's a phone number, 707, last 4 digits, 5605. Hello?
Hello?
Yes. I think you have your, do you have a couple of, do you have the meeting open
Manny,
twice?
Can you just put my device, please, so I don't have to use my phone, please?
I'm sorry?
My computer. Can you unmute my computer?
Who is it?
Can you
I don't
hear
know
me?
who you are.
Norma Ortiz,
Oh, yes, I will do that.
please. Thank you.
All right, Norma, do you have public comment?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just for the record, I want to say a couple words to our director, our DLAC director, Ms. Sarah Williams, and I will provide the translation as well. So I'm going to start with Spanish and then I'll go to English.
Okay.
Para nuestra apreciable y estimada directora Sarah Williams, gracias por toda su entrega, pasión, dedicación, diligencia, cariño y amor hacia la educación de nuestras hijas e hijos, hacia nosotros como padres de familia y miembros de DLAC y hacia nuestra hermosa comunidad del Valle de Napa. Su impecable y sólida trayectoria laboral, su carisma, su carácter y su personalidad han dejado una huella muy notable en nuestro distrito. Creo firmemente que cuando nuestras acciones están apegadas y alineadas en los principios del amor, se pueden consolidar y lograr muchos objetivos dentro del ámbito educativo. Educar es amar. Y su liderazgo, en mi opinión, ayudó a propiciar y mantener ese clima constructivo donde se nos permitió aportar nuestros comentarios a favor de los aprendices de inglés y a favor de la educación migrante. Así que mil gracias por eso. Por otra parte, ha sido un gran honor y placer formar parte de su equipo de trabajo. Sus palabras y energía me han contagiado de inspiración, situación que ha traído mucha alegría a mi corazón, el haberme sumado a sus esfuerzos, los cuales continúan transformando para bien la educación de nuestros hijos en gran medida. Más aún, seguirán impulsando la calidad en servicios y programas en beneficio de nuestro distrito escolar. En este caso, ahora con su actual cargo en el condado de Butte como directora de educación migrante de la región 2, que incluye el Distrito Escolar Unificado del Valle de Napa. Ha sido una experiencia muy enriquecedora y motivante el haberme desempeñado como representante ILAC y miembro de DLAC en estos últimos 3 años bajo su tutela y guía, de los cuales he aprendido enormemente y me han ayudado a seguir creciendo como más como persona. Y esto fue posible en gran medida gracias a su labor. Y como es bien sabido, la esencia del ser humano y la bondad al prójimo es fundamental y característico de un todo complemento, en donde cada una de nuestras experiencias nos ayudan a crecer el uno del otro, creo yo. No es un adiós, sino al contrario, yo lo veo como un nuevo amanecer, donde se seguirán creando y fortaleciendo lazos de oportunidades, objetivos y metas a corto y largo plazo para seguir apoyando la educación y el aprendizaje de nuestros hijos. Me enorgullece decir que es un elemento muy valioso. Tanto ILAC, DILAC, estamos muy agradecidos por todo su desempeño, su compromiso y servicio durante estos últimos 28 años de su vida con nosotros. Por mi parte, personalmente le agradezco todo lo que me ha enseñado, su conexión con nosotros, el haberme permitido aprender de sus experiencias. Además, el hecho de atender y dar respuesta a todas nuestras inquietudes, comentarios, opiniones y preguntas. Existen todavía muchas necesidades en el ámbito educativo, ya que no existe un sistema perfecto. Por lo tanto, estoy segura en que seguiremos trabajando para dar resultados y así asegurar un mejor porvenir y futuro en la educación de nuestros estudiantes. Una persona como usted nunca se olvida. Donde quiera que usted se encuentre, será por mi parte recordada con gran admiración y profundo respeto. Dear Director Sarah Williams, thank you for all the time, passion, dedication, diligence, and love towards the education of our children, towards us as parents and DLAC members, and towards our lovely Napa Valley community. Your solid and impeccable career path, your charisma, character, and personality have left a very notable footprint in our district. I firmly believe that when our actions are aligned and attached with the principles of love, many objectives can be consolidated and achieved in the scope of education. Educating is loving, and your leadership role, in my opinion, helped foster and maintain that constructive climate where we contributed with our comments in favor of English learners and in favor of migrant education. So many thanks for that. On the other hand, it has been a great honor and pleasure to be a part of your team. Your words and energy have deeply inspired me, a situation that has brought a lot of joy in my heart to have supported your efforts, which continue to transform for good the education of our children. Even more, this will continue to promote quality in services and progress and benefit of the school district, of our school district. In this case, with your current position in Butte County as Director of Migrant Education for Region 2, which includes the Napa Valley Unified School District. It has been a very enriching and motivating experience having served as an ELAC representative and DLAC member in the last 3 years under your guidance and tutelage, from which I have learned enormously, and that has helped me to continue to grow more as a person, which was largely possible thanks to you. It is well known that the essence of a human being and the kindness, goodness to others is fundamental and a characteristic of a whole, where each of our experiences shape and help us grow from each other. At least this is what I believe. It is not a goodbye. Conversely, I see it as a new dawn, metaphorically speaking, where we will be a continuity in creating and building opportunities, objectives, short and long-term goals in support of the education and learning of our children. I am proud to say that you're a very valuable asset. ELAC, DLAC is very grateful for your performance, your commitment, and your service during these last 28 years of your life with us. At least on my end, I personally thank you for everything you have taught me, your connection rapport with us, for giving me the opportunity to learn from your experiences. Also, for the fact of attending and responding to all our concerns, comments, opinions, and questions. There are still many needs in the educational field since there's no perfect system. Therefore, I am sure that we will continue working to provide results and ensure a better future in the education of our students. A person like you is never forgotten. Wherever you are, go, you will be remembered with great admiration and deep respect. Sincerely, Norma Ortiz, ELAC, DLAC. Thank you.
Thank you. Manny, do we have any other public comments?
Yes, Hannah Henry. Hannah, go ahead. You have to unmute your mic.
Hi,
There you
yep,
go.
hi. Thank you very much. This is addressed to Dr. Musetti and the board. It's nice to meet you in this context and very much appreciate your audience. Back in February, a group of parents and teachers and I submitted a letter to Dr. Musetti This is before COVID, before this most recent Black Lives crisis. We requested a meeting to discuss incorporating the 1619 project curriculum from the Pulitzer Center and an increased information curriculum for students about Indigenous culture. Please wait, Henry. And we heard no response. COVID happened, of course, and now we're in a new crisis, as you're well aware. Anti-racism materials are top of mind, and I recently saw that a curriculum suggestion was sent out, or at least reference materials to the district, including the 1619 project. This is very encouraging. But we are back to asking to, I'm going to resubmit the letter. It's a little too nice, I think, in tone because of the life and death nature of this, this topic. There's really an urgency right now. We're taking this request statewide. We have a group called Teach Truth that is gaining some traction. And we want to start with Napa. We believe very strongly that the vast, we know that the vast majority of teachers in this country are white. For many of us, I am white. For many of us, this information is new. We don't know how to teach it. We don't really know how to process it. We need professional development. So we request a response in some form for how funds would be allocated to help our teachers and our students rise to the occasion and do what's morally right, educating ourselves on the very traumatic history of this country, but the true history of this country. So I guess if this was in person, I would submit the letter for the record. How would I do that? Do I just email the secretary?
You can send it to my email that's online, Hannah, or you could you could also send it to public comment at nvusd.org.
Okay.
All right.
Wonderful.
Thank you. I look forward to receiving it.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Hannah. Fanny, do we have additional comments?
That concludes our comments at this time, President Martin.
Okay. We are moving to reports. Board of Education and Student Board Representatives.
Sorry, President Martin, just helping out here on Zoom. It looks like someone did raise their hand here at the last minute. Do you see that, man?
Yes. Go ahead, Corin. Are you there, Corin? You have to unmute your mic.
Last and final try, Corinne. Okay.
Okay. So moving on to reports, G1 Board of Education and Student Board Representative. We can start with Mr. David Gracia.
All right, so on the 23rd, I attended the Facilities and Technology Committee meeting and had a meeting as well with Rob to get a better understanding of our budget.
Hey, Mr. Joe Shunk.
I've attended one or two committee meetings, and I tune in on Mondays to the AXA webinar at about 5:30. So I'm basically trying to keep abreast of all of the things going on across the state.
I attended the Finance Committee meeting yesterday, and Ms. Jankowicz will be reporting on our findings there. And I've been researching reopening protocols for other schools, and kind of trying to make heads or tails of the state budget even before our finance meeting yesterday.
Thank you, Jose. Ms. Cindy Water.
Okay, am I allowed to report some good news from the school, for the school district? A little positive spin here?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I read in the paper that Congressman Mike Thompson had 5 appointments to the service academies, and 2 of them were from Vintage High School. Matt Lewis is going to Annapolis. Sebastian Vance is going to West Point. And at American Canyon Middle School, we had 2 8th graders, Josiah Romulo and Jonathan Chan. When they got honorable mention, there were hundreds of entries. C-SPAN's annual student CAM composition, and theirs was a downward spiral on homelessness. And this one, I voted on this one. Chanel Rosas, a 16-year-old senior next year at American Canyon High School, won the International Rube Goldberg competition with this amazing contraption that delivered a cake of Dove soap into her hands. And she was so funny and so deadpan, and I really hope Dove gives her a scholarship for product placement. It was great. And then on June 10th, 12th, 17th, and 19th, I went to the COVID response task force that contained 30 parents, teachers, parents. We had teachers, we had parents, some of them were both. We had administrators. We had people from all the departments, including food and operations and custodial. And it was 4 3-hour meetings where we went over the survey that we'd sent out to our parents. And we discussed, we learned a lot about COVID because one of our members is a school nurse. And we discussed the different modes of education for the fall, including completely at home, a hybrid, or coming back to school. And the superintendent will be telling you, more about that later on. And on Tuesday, we interviewed our student candidates for student rep and got a great one. And Elba will tell you about that. All the students were delightful.
Thank you, Cindy. Ms. Robin Jankowicz.
Thank you. I too attended the Facilities and Technology meeting and the Finance Committee meeting. And given my closed session report, I would just like to take a moment to say a few things about our outgoing food services director. Brandy was our first actual food service director. Within a year of her arrival, we were self-operating, and within 3 years, we had a program that supported the health and well-being of our students. I will list her accomplishments because they changed the food culture of this district, addressed food insecurity, brought fresh produce to our students. But I need to address why Brandy was such a standout. She believed in what was possible. She took the time to understand our needs and with a steady hand, changed the way we looked at food. She understood the value to our students. She understood that healthy offerings were more than just a meal. They influenced lifestyle choices, broadened exposure, and made sure that functioning brains could do just that. Under Brandy's leadership and with MP, we have a central kitchen. We will have 9 finishing kitchens. She branded Nosh and gave our district a food identity all of its own. She developed relationships with California growers and producers, shopped their products, and implemented sustainability standards. She applied for and received $365,000 in grant money, received a 2019 California Innovation Award for Fresh and Sustainable Kitchens, initiated 4 community eligibility schools, as well as 5 breakfast in the classroom programs. She has been the heartbeat of food service. We wish her every success, and may she spread the magic she created here all over this country in her new position. Thank you, Brandy. We all wish you well.
Thank you, Brandy.
you, Robin. Yes, thank you, Brandy. Ms. Elba Gonzalez Manes.
Yeah, I also want to say thank you, Brandy. We also got to enjoy the delicious food that she and her team would prepare. So leaving something behind, what better can we ask from an NVUSD past employee at this time, right? To leave something behind for us. Yes, I have the pleasure of announcing, as Trustee Water mentioned on Tuesday, we interviewed many of our student board representatives. This was my first time on the panel in my tenure as an elected official. So I was really excited to be part of that panel. And there's nothing, more important than our role. I mean, there's lots of important things, but when it comes to us engaging with our students is the role of the student board representative. It's going to be very different this next year, right? Because we don't get to have the diocese in the room and share the actual physical space with our student board representative. So with that being said, I'd like to announce that next year's school board representative, which I think I see her name on the attendees to this Zoom call, is Carla Magana. And Carla is from Vintage High School. She will be a senior next year. Her application was outstanding in various ways. I think as a school board member, one of those things that just makes us feel really proud of the work that we're doing. She truly believes that her success lies on the work that she's been doing with the NVUSD. It almost seemed like when we interviewed and talked to her, it's almost like talking to a global thinker. For a moment, towards the end of the interview, I had to remind myself what high school did she go to because of her global thinking, which is what we're looking at when it comes to a student board representative that is representing our entire school district, right? Referencing everybody from our TK all the way to our high school students. She's involved in various clubs. She is involved with, was it Bring Change to Mind, Teens Connect, Teens for Change, and Crush Leaders. So the list goes on and on, but I think what we learned a lot in interviewing Carla Magana is her deep care for her community, for her deep care of the students' well-being, her respect for her teachers and the district, and really in tune about what's working and not working. And we want that voice at our table. Is a student speaking from the heart and sharing with her honesty and also bringing ideas. She has definitely not only will she take what it sounds, in her conversations with her, it's doesn't take credit for that. It's all the work that she's been doing with others, and I think she brings that along with us. So we're really excited about that, and we look forward to having her join us. So welcome, Carla. I know you're listening. Welcome to our team here.
Welcome, Carla.
Welcome. And I have to admit, like, all the applications are that much valid. I'm sure it's super hard. I participated, I want to say my first year with Jose, if I'm not mistaken. It was a fantastic process. It's just so hard to choose. And I totally feel like it doesn't sadden me about it. That just means that I'm sure they can reapply and they can, they'll have something else to look forward to. Because I had an understanding that they weren't seniors, the other students that applied. So there's more possibilities.
I have to say that Carla applied before and encouraged to apply again. And I think that brought her even more wealth of experience and knowledge, and you could tell that right away in the interview. She was outstanding on pretty much everything.
That's awesome.
And I I should add that we have an excellent alternate named Selena Tellez from American Canyon High School.
Hey, American Canyon.
Yes, ACHS.
Yeah, Selena, I was going to mention that. Yeah, she, American Canyon, very much community oriented, really involved in her school. You know, she's currently planning a blood drive, involved with charity. You know, she's in the National Honor Society, and really in tune about embracing our students' creativity. And really, you know, her heart is very much in the arts. So that perspective always, you know, is welcome on our board here. You know, programs are very important to her, as it should be as a student. So we have a fantastic alternate that definitely will make us all proud.
Sounds great. Thank you guys for your report. Not much to report here. I missed our finance committee. Unfortunately, I just had change of plans and I was on the road. But I did want to say that I was involved also in my first ever evaluation for the superintendent. And as I know that we're still not there to report out or report to our superintendent her evaluation, I'd like to proudly say we have reached now 10 pages of a superintendent evaluation. So I think it's going to speak volumes. It was a great opportunity to see where everyone was at, the work, the magnificent work, and also the hard work that our superintendent is doing and our staff. So when that time comes, I can't wait, and hopefully I don't do Joe or Jose any injustice on how a president evaluation is supposed to go. So I don't think there's a way, but I think for sure that I'm trying to nail it down here. Ms. Rosanna Rossetti. You're muted. Rosanna, you're muted.
Thank you so much for the reminder. President Martin, before we go to staff reports, we agendized tonight the equity policy, and it would be great if you could do the introduction to the policy on behalf of the school board.
Of course. So a couple of thoughts that were put together for this presentation. Over the past few weeks, we have witnessed the powerful potential of our young people through their peaceful participation and protests, and by watching them move on to new adventures through many joyous in-person and virtual promotion and graduation ceremonies. However, we also know that our young people, despite the hope and promise they represent in today's world, we're facing a legacy of racial oppression and social injustice that demands an unwavering call to action. The unrest we saw in the aftermath of the death of George Floyd requires public institutions like Napa Valley Unified School District to work intentionally to dismantle institutional racism and inequities. Based on recent review of the district's data for our largest minority student demographic, the Latinx student population, at our June 11th board meeting, it is clear that Napa Valley Unified School District must intentionally focus on closing the opportunity and achievement gaps our students undoubtedly face. Our current academic and behavioral outcomes for the Latinx NVUSD student population, representing 56% of our district's enrollment, or approximately 10,000 students, are unacceptable and demonstrate how institutional racism intentionally creates barriers to student success. The Black Lives Matter movement currently taking place in our country forces every member of our community to recognize that this is no longer enough to simply be aware of the critical weaknesses and biases that perpetuate these racialized inequities. Rather, we need to work purposefully, and strategically to dismantle them while upholding ourselves to the highest of standards. In the Napa Valley Unified School District, our Board of Education adopted Board Policy 0415 in June of 2019, an equity policy that provides our organization a framework for guiding decision-making around instilling equity in our district. Our schools will not accept nor maintain the status quo of low performance for historically marginalized student populations. In fact, our equity policy requires us to eradicate institutional bias and disrupt the statistical trends generated by the inequities that often plague our public institutions. Thank you.
So thank you, President Martin, for that introduction. I'm going to start off my superintendent report with illuminating some of the components of the equity policy that are very, very relevant given what's going on in today's world and the vision and the strategic plan of the Napa Valley Unified School District moving forward. So this powerful policy mentioned by President Martin articulates a vision for a better future, requiring NVUSD to proactively identify class and cultural biases, as well as practices, policies, and institutional barriers that negatively impact student learning, perpetuate opportunity gaps, and impede access. We strive to eliminate inequalities by believing all of our students, especially our Black and Brown students who've been historically underserved by our school system, can succeed through the implementation of the principles outlined in Board Policy 0415, again adopted in June of last year. Specific measures within our equity policy include the following, and you can find this in our database for our board policies. Is number one, to routinely assess student needs based on data disaggregated by race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic and cultural backgrounds in order to enable equity-focused policy, planning, and resource development decisions. Number two, analyzing expenditures and allocating financial and human resources in a manner that provides all students with equitable access to district programs, support services, and opportunities for success, and promotes equity and inclusion in the district. Such resources include access to high-quality administrators, teachers, and other personnel, funding, technology, equipment, textbooks, and other instructional materials, facilities, and community resources or partnerships. Number three, enabling and encouraging students to enroll in, participate in, and complete curricular and extracurricular courses, advanced college preparation courses and programs, and other student activities. Number four, building a positive school climate that promotes student engagement, safety, and academic and other supports for students. Number five, adopting curriculum and instructional materials that accurately reflect the diversity among student groups. Number six, providing and/or collaborating with local agencies and community groups to ensure the availability of necessary support services for students in need. Number seven, promoting the employment and retention of a diverse staff that reflects the student demographics of the community. Number eight, providing district staff with ongoing research-based professional learning and professional development on culturally responsive instructional practices. And finally, number nine, conducting program evaluations that focus on equity and address the academic outcomes and performance of all students on all indicators. In sum, the policy states that the board shall regularly monitor the intent and impact of district policies and decisions in order to safeguard against disproportionate or unintentional impact on access to district programs and achievement goals for specific student populations in need of services. So as a governance team, it was shared at our last board meeting on June 11th, we remain committed to implementing equity-based practices with full integrity to better address the needs of our underserved communities and our at-promise student population. This concept is nested not only in this policy, but it's specifically also in our strategic plan. We're committed to the following next steps during the current cycle of our strategic plan between now through 2022 as we work through the execution of all 6 goals in the plan. We plan to engage key community leaders and stakeholders in a discussion about how the school district can better serve its at-promise students of color. We're going to require culturally competency training for current and future NVUSD employees with a keen focus on anti-bias professional development. We will expand our ethnic study course offerings after an evaluation at our high schools and build workforce capacity to deliver the courses through strong, sustained recruitment. We will also look to expand culturally and linguistically relevant curriculum at the elementary and middle school levels too. We'll strengthen the establishment, purpose, and functions of our District English Learner Advisory Committee and our Site English Learner Advisory Committees across the district to build parent leadership capacity and engagement within our culturally and linguistically diverse parent communities. We plan to strengthen ongoing efforts to increase the diversity in our teaching and administrative staff as we aim to create a more reflective workforce of our student population. And of course, we will do this work by collaborating with the Napa Valley Education Association, NVEA, with NAPS, our Napa Association of Pupil Services, and CSEA to address issues of equity and access in our classrooms. We can't do it without them. We will also consider what task force or committee structures, either existing and or new, would be most effective in supporting high quality implementation of this equity policy work. And we will analyze our ongoing cycles of student, staff, and community feedback to ensure our work is making the intended meaningful impact. In addition, I'd like to add that in the current 2019-2020 school year, NVUSD has started a math task force, a discipline task force, and the development of a more resourced, more clearly articulated academic and behavioral intervention system to meet the needs of our historically underserved students. All three of these efforts have been launched with the focus on ensuring the system works harder and more intentionally to support and improve the academic outcomes for our diverse student populations. In the policy arena, in alignment with Goal 5 of our strategic plan, which is equity-centered leadership and building an inclusive organizational culture, NVUSD will also closely monitor the implementation of various board policies that the board recently updated, focused on both non-discrimination and inclusiveness. Specifically, recently revised board policy, board BP 5145.3, which states the Board of Education desires to provide a safe school environment that allows all students equal access and opportunities in the district's academic, extracurricular, and other educational support programs, services, and activities. We know that the Napa Valley Unified School District has the capacity to address the social injustices and inequities in our community, and I'm confident, very confident in our community and organization's ability and commitment to improve our school district and make the world a better place. So let's all get to work on it. So I invite the community to join us in that really, really important work. So it's a blessing to illuminate the courageous policy that was passed by the school board back in June of 2019. And so this is work that will launch this summer, being led, of course, by our instructional division. There's a lot of implications for the classroom. So I look forward to working closely with our new assistant sup, Pat Andrew Jennings, on that work. I know her team will do an extraordinary job advancing that improvement agenda. Before I go to the assistant superintendent's reports, I do have a critical update for the board and the community. So I'm going to ask Mr. Ruiz if you can please put up the visual that I shared with you right before the meeting. So we know top of mind right now is NVUSD's plan around the reopening of schools. Trustee Water highlighted the fact that the school district did conduct a task force. Our task force, the COVID-19 reopening of task force started its work back a couple of weeks ago. And you'll see the timeline here that demonstrate what the planning timeline is for us to inform our community around what the solution is going to be for reopening school in the fall. Tonight, just to manage expectations, we do not have an announcement around that exact plan, but we did want to orient the community and the board towards our timeline on how we're going to be approaching the work and when the announcement regarding our plan for reopening for the 2021 school year, what that will look like. So of course, just a reminder, March 13th, we had to close our campuses due to COVID-19. April 3rd through the 9th, NVUSD extended closures throughout the school year, and we more formally launched our distance learning model. April and May, we gathered parent and staff input surveys, conducted virtual board meetings, got lots of public comment in those meetings, and then I did a series of Facebook Lives, Coffee with the Superintendent, As we were responding to COVID-19 through our campus closure and launching distance learning, I wanted to create opportunities to really communicate with the community, but also listen and receive feedback based on the experience that we had this spring, which we know was challenging on many, many fronts for all of us. On June 5th, the COVID-19 Response Task Force launched. We convened 4 times, right? As soon as school ended, we got to work on putting together the task force that was composed, like Trustee Water had stated, as a participant board representative. It included parents, teachers, site administrators, district administrators. We had a nurse, of course, given the nature of the topic, who did a nice, strong orientation towards the reality of COVID-19 and the impact on potential school operations if and when campuses open. We did a lot of learning around our constraints, our financial constraints, and the recommendations from the Center of Disease Control, our local public county health office, and the recommendations coming from the California Department of Education. On June 23rd, we have started negotiations, discussions. We're in early phases of this work with our associations, and those will be ongoing through July. Any adjustment to how we operate school will require partnership of all of our labor groups. And so Ms. Dana Page, our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, will be leading those efforts with all of our labor unions. Our plan, currently what's going on, actually, before I jump to our plan, currently what's going on post the task force convening its 4 full meetings is we have divided into smaller work groups. These are nimble groups that are working on key areas like scheduling, like school operations, which include ideas about transportation, food services, entry and exit off campuses. We also have a working group working on extracurricular activities and athletics and the implications of the pandemic continuing in the fall, and the potential recommendations that we will need to adhere to if and when we bring our students back on campus in each of these different areas. And then, of course, a very core important work group that will focus on the teaching and learning models that we will be able to offer in the fall, relative to whatever the public health conditions are. Those work groups will be continuing to work over the course of next week. They've been launching that work and doing that work over the course of this current week, with the goal of us having a more detailed implementation plan to submit to Napa County Public Health Tuesday, July 7th. We want to give ourselves a couple, the Monday and the Tuesday of that week, to sunshine the details of the plan with some of our labor unions before the submission to Napa County Public Health. We'll send it to Napa County Public Health for a review and approval. And then the goal is that July 16th, we, if all this goes according to plan, of course, it's all subject to change and flexible, contingent upon some of the response that we get from Napa County Public Health and how much revision or rework we may have to consider on the plan that was submitted. But if all goes well, our goal is to then conduct a special board meeting on Thursday, July 16th. At that special meeting, that we will only have the sole item of dedicating the time to the conversation and orientation to the school board around our school reopening plan, and actually submit it for action and approval to the school board. Assuming approval from the school board, assuming approval from Napa County Public Health, our goal then will be to communicate to our families as early as Friday, July 17th. Of course, after also first communicating internally to all of our staff. Let me make a little move here so I can see what it says next. And then from July 22nd through August 7th, we will have, to be announced, several public engagement events that will probably be in the form of virtual town halls. Let me move this over. Virtual town halls with parents, different social media channels. And so stay tuned once those plans go through kind of an initial community outreach that that weekend in July. It'll be ongoing conversation and communication with our parent constituents to make sure that they feel like they are prepared and can plan for the reopening of school. Our target remains that target in red, which is the first day of school on August 19th. And so what I do have to report is, after much discussion with the task force that had, again, that multi kind of stakeholder lens, it is really clear that in the Napa Valley Unified School District, a majority of our families, our student population, have an interest in returning to school on campus. We understand that families have great concerns about health and safety. And so right now we are planning and working in those work groups to detail all of the mitigation strategies that would be necessary in order to ensure that our students remain safe. It is clear that a significant majority, through the data analysis, a significant majority of our families and students have an interest in returning to school on a daily basis, Monday through Friday. And so right now the teams are working really, really hard to find ways to deliver on that promise of education, while also adhering to public health recommendations and different risk mitigation strategies, so that we can also, while paying attention to education and providing socio-emotional support to our students, that they're also, of course, experiencing school in a safe and healthy environment, given that these are pandemic conditions. So I know everybody wants an answer really quickly, but we want to do our due diligence. We want to put together a robust plan that again, pays attention to education, socio-emotional support, health and safety. We also know that although many of our families have demonstrated an interest in returning to school Monday through Friday, we know that there's also families that really don't feel comfortable returning to school until potentially there's a vaccine, or till the pandemic numbers aren't quite what they are today, as revealed in the public health trends. And so it is clear that NVUSD will have to ensure that we have a model, a distance learning model, and a format for families and students who do not feel comfortable returning to our school campuses if they are allowed to officially open after approval with Napa County Public Health. So we look forward to that announcement in mid-July as promised. So stay tuned, and everybody's on summer vacation, and I hope that they're enjoying that. We're really, really busy at work, not doing too much vacationing, but getting ready for these plans and this announcement, and being ready to potentially receive our students that first day of school on August 19th. So with that, I'm going to toss to Assistant Superintendent Pat Andre Jennings from Instructional Services, who's going to give you her report.
Good evening, President Martin, trustees, and Dr. Massetti. As we come to the end of June, the Instructional Division is wrapping up the 2019-20 school year. I want to take a moment to acknowledge some of the transitions that are occurring in the Instructional Support Services Division. Dr. Sarah Williams, the Director of Assessment and Innovation, and Sam Buffenberger, a SPED coordinator, have both taken positions outside of the district. I want to thank Sarah for the 28 years she served in multiple roles in the district, and to Sam for her work in special education and her previous work as the coordinator of our Common Core implementation. We appreciate Sarah and Sam for their service to the families and students of Napa Valley Unified, and wish them well in their new endeavors. As Dr. Massetti shared, the Instructional Support Services Division is hard at work planning the start of next school year. We will continue that work, and that is pretty much what is consuming all of our time. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Ms. Dana Page, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources.
Thank you, Dr. Massetti. President Martin, Board of Trustees. I'm happy to share a positive update regarding certificated staffing for next year. Previously, on May 14th, as you remember, it was with heavy hearts that the board approved a resolution which effectively laid off 74 teachers. We committed to continued rehiring as staffing needs became clear and additional vacancies due to natural attrition became available. I'm pleased to report, as of today, we have been able to hire back 48 of those 74.
Miss Dana, I think we lost you.
Why don't we come back to Miss Page?
Again, whoop,
We lost you, Dana.
sorry.
We heard 8 teachers and then we lost you.
Oh, bummer. So 48 out of the 74, 19 deferred offers for 1 year and accepted positions with other districts. There are 7 teachers we've not been able to make an offer to yet, and they remain on the 39-month rehire list until we can. And again, we commit to ensuring we do everything possible to bring those teachers back as soon as possible. Finally, as this is our last regular board meeting of the year, I want to highlight the importance of everyone taking some time to rest and relax despite everything that's going on. Summer is typically the time many employees recharge, and although grand trips abroad may be off the table, I hope our incredibly hardworking staff find other ways to unwind and disconnect. Looking at the mountain of work that awaits this fall, it will be especially tempting to try to jump in and get a head start, but try to resist the urge to push on without proper rest. The challenge ahead is undeniable, and we need everybody at their best to succeed on behalf of our kids, our colleagues, and our community. And don't forget, that starts with taking care of yourself. Be well and take care. This concludes my report.
Thank you, Dana. That was so refreshing.
Okay, Mr. Rob Manguala, our Assistant Superintendent of Business Services.
Good evening, President Martin, Board of Trustees, Dr. Musetti. Since I'll be speaking at great length about our budget and the California economy, tonight's update will focus on some work out of the enrollment office and data team. In response to COVID-19 and the need to create the safest environment possible for our families, both enrollment and all of our annual paperwork that families complete, we're fast-tracked, and that work will all be moved online for the fall. New families to NVUSD can now use our online enrollment system built on the Schoolmint platform to enroll their students. Instead of bringing paperwork to a school site and having to meet face-to-face, families can now enroll via cell phone or computer. Families that need help will also be able to come and get some help from the enrollment office. We're putting the final touches on the enrollment center, including plexiglass barriers to keep our families and employees safe. If you get a chance, I highly encourage you to stop by and see the great work and transformation that's happened to the enrollment center there. Families will also be able to update their address, download the student handbook, and sign all necessary forms in the fall online. This project has and continues to be a great deal of work. I want to thank Chris Gross for leading up this work with Christina Roberts in the enrollment department, B. Braun and Kim Kyle in the data department for their hard work on these projects. This concludes my report.
Thank you. And Assistant Superintendent, Mr. Mike Pearson from Operational Services.
Thank you, Dr. Musetti. Good evening, President Martin, Board of Education trustees, and members of the NVUSD community. I appreciate the opportunity to provide you with an update with Operational Services. Tonight, my report is going to center on the NVUSD Operational Services work on developing action plans for the 2021 school year, along with acknowledging one of our directors who's leaving us on June 30th. The directors of maintenance, operations, transportation, and food service have been meeting regularly with myself to formulate the logistical and operational activities associated with opening school, taking into consideration all the factors required to ensure the health and safety of students, of staff and students. We've researched and grounded ourselves in several resources such as the California Department of Public Health, Napa County Public Health, and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and other useful resources aligned for the aforementioned governmental agencies. In addition, Operational Services has recently partnered with NVUSD Instructional Services to make sure there's a high level of coherence between school site staff and district staff regarding protocols and safeguards, again, to make sure health and safety for all is at the forefront. And finally, I want to take a moment to recognize the Director of Food Service, Brandy Tribalvis, as Robin Jankowitz already mentioned earlier. She has accepted a position with the Chef Ann Foundation, where she'll be the Director of Food Services, serving school districts throughout the nation, making the transition to scratch cooking. And Brandy will be leaving us on July 1st. Brandy came to NVUSD 3 years ago from Boulder Valley School District in Boulder, Colorado. After interviewing and then accepting the position with NVUSD, Brandy moved out to Napa, not knowing very much about NVUSD or the community of Napa Valley. Over the course of 3 years, Brandy has single-handedly transformed the NVUSD food service to a scratch cook model, putting out daily, highly nutritious and healthy meals that appeal to all age levels. In addition, she's been instrumental in the design and construction of the central kitchen, along with the new construction and modernization of several elementary school kitchens. And finally, through shrewd planning, cost-cutting, grant writing, and streamlining procedures, Brandy has been able to cut in half the deficit incurred against the general fund. With her determination, persistence, commitment, and dedication to NVUSD, Brandy has left an indelible mark on NVUSD Foodservice program, and we are grateful for her leadership and vision that will carry on for years to come. Thank you, Brandy. You will be missed. This concludes my report tonight.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the reports. I did, before we move on, I did want to do a little shout out. I'm very, very sorry about this. This is very last minute. I did receive an email from Jennifer Baker talking to us about the resources for the anti-racism and equity resources for teachers and staff. And I had forwarded her and her staff a really great email. They ended up writing back, and it was Ms. Kate McMillan, who she was just trying to keep us in the loop to know that they are updating the district anti-racism collection. As more relevant and vetted resources become available, she'll let us know what's going on and also make those available to us. So I will forward that email to all of our trustees so you know that there are ebooks that will be grade appropriate as well, and then multiple copies in both audio and digital forms for middle and high school will be available. So I just wanted to let you know that a little shout out to Kate McMillan, the coordinator for library services for NVUSD. Okay, and I'm sorry to do this to you all, but I do need to make another change. I2A, I know I moved to change it, but I need to change it one more time, and I would like to change I2A in front of approval of consent agenda.
I'll move.
Second.
Okay, a first by Mr. David Gracia, a second by Ms. Gonzalez Mares. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Nays?
Aye.
Abstention? Motion carries. Okay, so now we move to I2A for the presentation with District English Learner Advisory Committee, DLAC.
Hi, I believe that's, this is Pat Andre Jennings getting ready to share. Hello. And Mr. Ruiz, I'm going to need to share my screen.
You can share your screen, Pat. Ms. Andre Jennings.
Okay, so good evening again, President Martin and trustees. Tonight we have a presentation from representatives from our District English Learner Advisory Council, otherwise known as DLAC. The presentation was created in coordination with Dr. Sarah Williams, the Director of Assessment, Innovation, and English Learner Services, and parents Norma Ortiz, Angelica Pera, and Veronica Zavala. As you will shortly see, the presentation will help to inform the work we have ahead to better meet the needs of our English learners and their families. I want to thank Dr. Williams and our parents for their hard work in creating this presentation. After I play the presentation, our DLAC representatives will be available for questions.
Good evening, board members and the public in general. Welcome to our DLAC presentation. The following presentation will be both English and Spanish to accommodate the narrators as well as the audience. We thank you for your patience. Buenas tardes, mesa directiva y el público en general. Bienvenidos a nuestra presentación DLAC. La siguiente presentación será tanto en inglés como en español para adaptarse a los narradores así como a la audiencia. Les agradecemos su paciencia. Distance learning. We understand that the coronavirus caused incredible pressure on the school system. We appreciate the work of all school staff to help students continue the learning. There has been and continues to be a gap in the services needed to give Latino families equal opportunities for success. Many parents of English learner students have had little, if any, experience with computers. Families have had bad experiences with temporary offers for internet service, which ended up in an unanticipated ongoing expenses. Many needed much more information on the infrastructure offers being made for internet. Besides teachers working with students online, we need a number we could call that would provide real-time support for computer issues. Too many teachers were trying to balance instruction and parent troubleshooting at the same time. Messages from the hotline were not responded to in a timely manner. Generally needs more support for communication at all times, but especially in a time of crisis.
Hola, mi nombre es Angélica Parra, aprendizaje a distancia. Comprendemos que el coronavirus causó una presión increíble en el sistema escolar. Agradecemos el trabajo de todo el personal escolar para ayudar a que los estudiantes continúen el aprendizaje. Ha habido y continúa habiendo una brecha en los servicios necesarios para dar a las familias latinas igualdad de oportunidades para el éxito. Muchos padres y madres de estudiantes aprendices de inglés han tenido poco o ninguna experiencia con computadoras. Las familias han tenido malas experiencias con ofertas temporales para servicios de internet, que ocasionaron gastos imprevistos continuados. Muchas familias necesitaron mucha más información sobre las ofertas de infraestructura que se realizan para los servicios de internet, además de que los maestros trabajen con los estudiantes online. Necesitamos un número al que poder llamar que proporciona ayuda en tiempo real con los problemas relacionados con las computadoras. Demasiados maestros estaban intentando equilibrar la enseñanza y la resolución de problemas para padres y madres al mismo tiempo. Los mensajes en línea de atención no fueron respondidos en un plazo razonable. En general, se necesita más apoyo en la comunicación, pero especialmente en un momento de crisis.
Hola, mi nombre es Norma Ortiz. Voy a hablar acerca de la reestructuración del distrito, redistricting. DLAC members have had sensitivity around the issues of redistricting. We understand the trustees were not responsible for the urgency of the messaging around redistricting. Considering redistricting specifically, communications for the issue were rushed and superficial. There was an expectation for deep participation on the part of the Latino community, with very little parent education offered. Many Latino parents don't get sufficient opportunity to practice civic engagement in their home country. For the families who do understand the implications of the law, there are lingering unanswered questions, especially how can community members be sure that elected officials have the appropriate levels of knowledge and education for the positions they hold? How will a governing body maintain balance when members all represent different community interests? And how will these challenges affect our children's education? If our opinions are truly valued, they should be solicited in a parent education setting, offered in the language of the audience, where an investment of time is made to support our understanding, so we can engage equally. Los miembros del DLAC tienen alguna susceptibilidad sobre el asunto de la reestructuración del distrito. Comprendemos que los miembros del Consejo no fueron responsables de la urgencia sobre los mensajes de la reestructuración del distrito. Considerando específicamente la reestructuración del distrito, las comunicaciones sobre el asunto fueron apresuradas y superficiales. Había una expectativa de una profunda participación por parte de la comunidad latina, pero se ofreció muy poca información para los padres y madres. Muchos padres y madres latinos no tienen la oportunidad suficiente para practicar la participación cívica en sus países de origen. Para las familias que comprendemos las implicaciones de la ley, todavía hay preguntas pendientes sin responder. Específicamente, ¿cómo pueden los miembros de la comunidad estar seguros de que los oficiales electos tienen los niveles de conocimiento y educación apropiada para los puestos que ocuparán? ¿Cómo se mantiene el equilibrio en un órgano de gobierno cuando los miembros representan diferentes intereses comunitarios? ¿Y cómo afectarán estos cambios a la educación de nuestros hijos e hijas? Si nuestras opiniones son realmente valoradas, deberían solicitarse en un entorno de educación para padres y madres, ofrecidas en el lenguaje de la audiencia donde se realiza una inversión de tiempo para apoyar nuestra comprensión, para que podamos involucrarnos de manera igualitaria. Social emotional support. There are additional burdens on English learner students which make them vulnerable in schools, and even more so during times of crisis. Many students have to navigate schools by themselves or with little support from their families due to the language and cultural barriers. This creates emotional stress that places students at higher risk of failure. The risks are even greater at times of crisis, like during the shutdown, when students have to manage technology difficulties on top of other stressors they face. English learner students with special needs face the greatest risk of all because learning difficulties complicate all the other challenges. Napa Valley Unified School District needs to have a plan for supporting students in the short term because of the loss of skills that has taken place due to distance learning. In the long term, Napa Valley Unified School District needs to better support staff who work with English learners so they can understand the obstacles these students and their families face in the system. Unpleasant behaviors from both general and special education students will be present when students are under pressure and feel they have no one who understands their struggles. Napa Valley Unified School District needs to better prepare staff to manage these behaviors from a cultural perspective, since many Napa Valley Unified School District educators have never faced the same challenges as their students.
Apoyo socioemocional. Hay cargas adicionales puestas sobre los estudiantes aprendices de inglés que los hacen vulnerables en la escuela e incluso más durante momentos de crisis. Muchos estudiantes tienen que navegar por la escuela solos o con poco apoyo de sus familias debido a barreras lingüísticas y culturales. Esto crea estrés emocional que pone a los estudiantes en mayor riesgo de fracaso. Estos riesgos son incluso mayores durante momentos de crisis. Durante el cierre de escuelas, cuando los estudiantes tienen que gestionar dificultades tecnológicas, además de todos los factores de estrés a los que se enfrentan. Los estudiantes aprendices de inglés con necesidades especiales se enfrentan al mayor riesgo de todos, porque las dificultades de aprendizaje complican todos los demás desafíos. El Distrito Escolar Unificado del Valle de Napa necesita tener un plan para apoyar a los estudiantes a corto plazo, por la pérdida de habilidades que han tenido lugar durante el aprendizaje a distancia. A largo plazo, el Distrito Escolar Unificado del Valle de Napa necesita dar mejor apoyo al personal que trabaja con aprendices de inglés, para que comprendan los obstáculos a los que los estudiantes y sus familias se enfrentan en el sistema. Habrá presentes comportamientos desagradables, tanto de los estudiantes de educación general como de educación especial, cuando los estudiantes se encuentran bajo presión y sienten que no tienen a nadie que comprenda sus problemas. El Distrito Escolar Unificado del Valle de Napa necesita preparar mejor al personal para gestionar estos comportamientos desde una perspectiva cultural, dado que muchos de los educadores del Distrito Escolar Unificado del Valle de Napa nunca se han enfrentado a los mismos desafíos que sus estudiantes.
Need to know. In Latin American countries, schools have a similar structure. Here, schools can be very different from one another. Schools in Napa Valley Unified School District have unequal resources for supporting families whose countries of origin are not the U.S. It would be far more effective if all schools had equitable resources. Parents need foundational information about the school district. It would be best for all families to have an annual standardized orientation with complete handouts, which address existing programs at every school and how those programs align with the larger district vision. Information regarding ELAC, DLAC, and other committees. Specific contact information of various staff, both district and site level, depending upon the nature of our question. It seems the district has undergone many changes in a short period of time. It is not always clear who to go with feedback, concerns, or questions. We want our kids to get a good education, so we need all the information and no assumptions.
Hola, mi nombre es Verónica Zavala. Los elementos que deben saber: en países latinoamericanos las escuelas tienen una estructura similar. Aquí las escuelas pueden ser muy diferentes entre sí. Las escuelas del Distrito Escolar Unificado del Valle de Napa tienen recursos desiguales para dar apoyo a las familias cuyos países de origen no son los Estados Unidos. Sería mucho más efectivo si todas las escuelas tuviesen recursos equitativos. Los padres y madres necesitan información fundamental sobre el distrito escolar. Sería mejor para todas las familias tener una orientación anual estandarizada con panfletos completos que traten programas existentes en cada escuela y como esos programas se alinean con la visión general del distrito, información sobre ILAC, DILAC y otros comités, información de contacto específica sobre diversos miembros del personal, tanto a nivel del distrito como de la escuela, dependiendo de la naturaleza de nuestras cuestiones. Parece que el distrito ha experimentado muchos cambios en un breve periodo de tiempo. No siempre resulta claro a quién acudir con valoraciones, preocupaciones o preguntas. Queremos que nuestros hijos e hijas tengan una buena educación, así que necesitamos toda la información y que no se hagan suposiciones.
Equity gap. Families from other countries experience cultural challenges when they enter the U.S. school system. Results in them feeling like you have to walk into the demands schools make for parent participant. Assumptions that all parents have equal preparation ignores the cultural realities faced by many English learner families. Principals are the ambassadors for the district at each site. They should be a central figure in maintaining and having a welcoming environment for all in families. Their visibility in stakeholder meetings like ELAC is a way of demonstrating their interest.
Your mic. Your mic, I'm having trouble hearing you.
District staff needs the needs of students who have experienced loss of skills due to the shutdown. The district should consider partnerships with entities which can help families acquire low-cost solutions for household internet and purchase devices for the purpose of closing the digital divide. Parents much more education about how to use technology and how to support their children with technology, given the demand schools put on families to be technically literate.
Brechas de ecuanimidad. Las familias de otros países tienen desafíos culturales cuando entran en el sistema escolar de Estados Unidos, lo que conlleva que piensen que tienen que caminar en dos mundos diferentes. Las exigencias que hacen en las escuelas sobre la participación parental y las suposiciones de que todos los padres y madres tienen una preparación igual ignoran las realidades culturales a las que se enfrentan muchas familias de aprendices de inglés. Los directores son los embajadores del distrito. En cada escuela deberían ser una figura central para mantener un entorno agradable para todas las familias. Su visibilidad en las reuniones de partes interesadas como el ILAC es una manera de demostrar su interés en representar a todos los miembros de la comunidad y no debería delegarse en otros empleados. El reciente cierre también ha causado disparidades en cuanto a ecuanimidad entre algunas familias. El personal del distrito necesita tener un plan para dar respuesta a las necesidades de los estudiantes que han sufrido pérdida de habilidades debido al cierre. El distrito debería considerar asociaciones con entidades que puedan ayudar a las familias a adquirir soluciones de bajo costo para tener internet en casa y comprar dispositivos con el propósito de cerrar la brecha digital. Muchos padres y madres necesitan más educación sobre cómo usar la tecnología y cómo dar apoyo con la tecnología a sus hijos e hijas, dadas las exigencias que las escuelas ponen sobre las familias para que tengan una alfabetización técnica. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to share our concerns and interests. And we are now available to take any questions you might have. Muchas gracias por darnos la oportunidad de compartir nuestras preocupaciones e intereses. Ahora estamos disponibles para tomar alguna pregunta que pudieran tener. Gracias.
Are there any questions or comments?
Pat, can we, before we open it up for questions and comment, I want to make sure I have, we have speakers, I think, that are here representing the DLAC that may need translation. So I want to make sure that Ms. Cardenas is available in case the presenters need Spanish translation.
Okay.
I will, so if we do need that, I'll just need a moment to turn off interpretation services.
Okay, thank you. So I think Norma,
Yes.
if you wanted to say, are there any questions for the presenters or comments, trustees?
Or do we want to go public comment first?
Let's do public comment first, please, if you don't mind. Do I have any public comments?
Yes, we have Liliana Calderon.
Okay.
Liliana?
Hello, Dr. Musetti and Board of Trustees. I am totally agreed with DLAC. I don't think, like, you know, we have a good welcome program from the newcomers, but what we don't have is the social and emotional support that the student needs. I found that a lot of the students, how can they concentrate and get good grades if they have a lot of like a stress, anxiety for just coming to a new country, learning new language? I feel that we don't close the gap without having a good program, but we don't having the social emotional. I know that we have some wellness center, but in those wellness center, not all the social workers are bilingual, and sometimes it's not the same if a parent liaison is helping the family. They don't have this background about doing therapy or doing social work because they are not credentialed. So I think we have to have more prepared staff to deliver this service, because as you know, how can we ask those students to get an A or B if they're facing PTSD, if they're facing anxiety, trauma? We need to help and serve this community of newcomers. And I think we have to have a good program where all can move to the next level so they can learn and start moving to A through G requirements and all the stuff and participate. But first, we need to have a social and emotional support group for those students. And also, to finalize, also we have to educate parents more about the requirements, because sometimes we ask the parents about, you know, the attendance is critical, ABC, what it means. So we need to have a better understanding program where parents can feel more comfortable about what it means to be in this school district, and they can feel more welcome and feel that I can serve my child and who are the connections, because we're lacking in that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Liliana. Manny, do I have any additional comments?
I believe that's that completes all the comments. Norma, you had your hand up. Did you want to say something?
No, Norma's a presenter. She's a presenter, yeah.
Can I say
Okay.
something? Hello?
Sure.
Oh, I just really want to appreciate the space that we have been given to be pretty much engaged in all the ELAC and especially the DLAC meetings. I appreciate the support of Ms. Williams, of Pat, Jennings, of the parents, Angelica Parra, Veronica Zavala, and all the other parents that have attended, and the community in general, to our meetings. I appreciate also the fact that yesterday I had a meeting with Dr. Musetti, and she was describing that she was going to be very supportive with more structure in the DLAC meetings. So we're going to, I would like to pretty much see how that's going to look like, but I appreciate that we're going to be working hard to make sure that English language learners get all the supports they need despite all these present and perhaps the future challenges with how the schools are going to be reopening. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Norma. Amani, any additional comments before I open it back up to the board?
That concludes our comments at this time, President Martin.
Okay. Board, any questions for Norma or comments?
Well, I have a comment. First of all, thank you for coming. And I was just sitting here thinking how hard it is for a child at home to be, you know, looking at a screen and feeling that, you know, that there's no one there, you know, to help. And I think we're going to have opportunities to practice and get even better at it. And we're all traumatized. All of us have been traumatized this spring, some more than others. But there's something that you said that was written down. If homework is part of a student's grade, then teachers should be available to help. And I used to be a teacher and I gave homework, but it makes you, what is the purpose of homework anyway? Is it a grade booster, a grade destroyer? Is it something to practice skills? Is it to get ahead? I mean, if homework is part of a student's grade, then teachers should be available to help. And I'm really sympathetic for the child who feels that, you know, he's all alone and there's no one to ask. It's been a tough spring. And that is one reason why it was a new thing and we did the pass fail, and that was controversial. Not everyone liked it, but at the same time, you know, we do want kids to learn, you know, while they're at home. So I'm going to be thinking about this. Thank you.
President Martin, I would just like to address the DLEC parents. I really do want to commend you. I know given the unique setting and the fact that we haven't been able to convene in the traditional ways that we convene, which is in person, which really helps in building community and strengthening relationships. Despite the absence of all of that and our inability to be able to come together physically due to the pandemic, I can only imagine how much work it was to put together all of that content and organize it and gather the constructive feedback from the English learner parents who've been participating in the DLAC space. And so I just want to commend you for putting in what I'm sure was a tremendous effort to gather the information, to organize the information, and prepare it for public presentation to our school board and the community. So thank you for your time, for your commitment. And as I shared with Ms. Ortiz yesterday, I look forward to Ms. Pat Andrew Jennings, and the new instructional division team to engage with our DLAC and build strong ELACs across all of our schools, because all of our schools here have English language learners. And so we look forward to that path ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you for highlighting the communication and organizational issues in your report. I believe that those are problems that are widely held throughout the NVUSD structure, and I hope that we can put some focus now onto some of those issues.
I too want to say how much I appreciate just a well documented presentation. You know, needless to say, I think you could say, Norma and your team, you guys have the presentation and the recording down. I don't even know how to do that. So I was quite impressed by that, and didn't even know it was a feature. And I think I'm actually going to steal your idea for my future presentations. So that being said, just how you know, in having your input about distance learning and redistricting and the ongoing equity work and the communication needs, without going too much into it, absolutely understand each one. I think what is so important about DLAC and the role that you have and the importance of that is to definitely elevate those concerns and bring it to the board, which this is what you did. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for the parents who also participated in the presentation and sharing. You could tell from the tone of voice how much they care. And we know all of our parents in our district care very much, but there are certain areas that we know with our underrepresented and underserved students and their families. There's more work to be done. And I can't help over and over again, but to let you know that I too was an English language learner to this district when I came from Mexico to here in the 8th grade. And so I empathize extremely with this area. And I know with the leadership of Dr. Musetti, which I know you met with her already, in that ongoing communication and the leadership of this board, we're going to get to it, right? But there's a lot of challenges. It's not a change that happens overnight. It's going to require a lot of the patience and the steps to move forward. We're doing everything that we can on our end to be, first of all, financially stable, and then be ready for our families and our kiddos now that for preparing for the next school year, and definitely taking this into not only into consideration, it's a matter of our plan. It's part of what we've been doing. It's been in our strategic plan. So I just want you to know how much I appreciate all of this. So muchas gracias a todos los padres. No voy a traducirlo ahorita, pero porque tenemos a alguien que está traduciendo, pero muchas gracias por su información y su dedicación. Esto es de lo más importante, de la participación de los padres en nuestras juntas del distrito. Es lo más en cuestión de nuestro trabajo, escuchar su voz, ver lo que están, escuchar y entender lo que están expresando. Y estamos aquí para apoyarlos. Va a ser un camino bastante largo, va a ser con mucha dedicación, ¿verdad? Pero sabemos que contamos con ustedes y esto se hace en equipo. Aquí la doctora Rosana Museri, su mesa directiva de administración, maestros y todo el equipo, estamos a su lado para apoyarlos. Así que muchas gracias. Thank you.
Norma, I too want to say thank you. I echo my peers' thoughts. My takeaway was that we need to better define our shared goals. It seems like your thoughts fell into two categories under the DLAC umbrella, and then, as David stated, support for communication and more support. So I just wanted to thank you for so well articulating your thoughts, and I think we all look forward to the work ahead.
I'd like to address the presenters. I appreciate the substantive concerns you've raised. I would broaden your request to, while addressing our English language learning students and parents, much of what they ask for is needed by all our parents. And we have another item on the agenda later that indicates the need to do a great deal of educating all our parents around how schools are funded, how schools are run, and do that both for our parents and our community. So I'm hoping we can both find a way to do things specifically where schools in the U.S. are novel and confusing, but I can assure our parents here tonight that the way the schools are funded and run is very different from my youth to my now middle adulthood. So I would just suggest there are plenty of opportunities to explain things, to dialogue with with our parents that cuts across language.
And I would like to thank you and the parents for the time and effort. You know, it's refreshing when we get a group of parents whose interest in the district is not limited to a single issue or item, but really almost the whole breadth of concerns that we have within the district: curriculum, well-being, communication, technology. I think you do yourself proud by showing that you are interested in the whole child and the whole district. So I want to thank you for the time and effort, and I will certainly hold your group up as an example of how parents should be involved in the everyday lives of their students. So thank you very much.
Norma, I would like to personally thank you on my behalf. I do see that many of the things that you mentioned were challenges in both for our English learners and then also the district as a whole, especially with the district, or excuse me, with the distance learning. I think we can all agree that it has definitely been a I wouldn't say it's a struggle, because I think not seamlessly, but there's been its ups and downs. But the pivoting of the school district doing distant learning compared to other school districts, I have to say, really speaks volumes. That also isn't an excuse why some of our parents were struggling or were not able to troubleshoot or have communications. Their efforts were not being, addressed at the time. So I thank you for bringing those to light as well. And then, of course, when we're talking about equity, and I have to admit, I did not know equanimidad. That's a new word for me, because a lot of people say here in California, equidad. And so I guess that's the wrong word to use. And I was sitting here Googling it for a minute, and I said, yeah, you know what? That's the correct word. So thank you, because I've learned something new today. When we're talking about equity, we use the word equidad, and we've been using it freely, and that's not the correct word. So thank you very much to your staff for bringing that to light. So with that, do we have any other comments or questions for Norma or Pat? Yep. Well, thank you again, Ms. Norma. Thank you so much for your presentation. Pat, thank you too. I'm going to move on with our agenda. So we are on H, approval of consent agenda. Consent agenda background information on these items is provided to the board prior to the meeting. A common motion takes action without discussion on a roll call vote unless discussion of an item is requested by the board members.
So I would like to request several items to be pulled. Let me just look back at my notes real quick. It was H1A, H4M, H4U.
Can you hold on one second?
No problem.
H4M, M as in Mary?
Yes, M as in Mary.
Okay.
H4U, H4V, and H4W.
H4B and H4W. Okay. Any other items?
We had some of the same crossover. Can you add H4D to that, please?
H4D, Robin. And that's a renewal agreement for ATV Advantage. Okay. Any other items?
If there are no more, then I'll move to approve the rest.
Second.
First by Mr. Gracia and a second by Ms. Water. Is this roll call?
Yes.
Did I get that wrong?
Trustee Martin?
Aye.
Trustee Gonzalez Mares?
Aye.
Trustee Jankowicz?
Aye.
Trustee Water,
Aye.
Trustee Hurtado,
Aye.
Trustee Shunk,
Aye.
Trustee Gracia.
Aye.
Thank you.
We will start with item H1A.
I just had a quick question specifically on the facility advisor district-wide site inspection and software training. I was wondering if this was specifically going to help us catalog and improve our data collection for our SARC reports.
Yes, Trustee Gracia, we are very excited that we learned about this software program. We had numerous conversations with the vendor, both online and over the phone. We asked to have an opportunity to do a demo at a particular school site, and we did that approximately a week and a half ago at Alta Heights Elementary School, utilizing staff, and everybody came away incredibly impressed that this software is going to help us in cataloging kind of that snapshot of how our facilities are on that given day that we go through a particular campus. But more importantly, allow us to make sure that we're addressing our work orders in a timely manner and improve those work orders so that we can then improve the report that we put in the SARC on an annual basis.
That sounds great. I'll move to approve.
I'm going to try and do them all once we go through. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay. We will move to Robin, H4D.
I just want to make sure, depending on whatever decisions we make per individual sport, that we're not putting the cart before the horse, and we are not committed to that amount should there be changes in the athletic schedule.
Trustee Jankwitz, Assistant Superintendent Rob Manguala worked on this contract, so I think he can speak to that.
Okay.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Musetti. So I did work very closely with the vendor, and we did change some of the language so that if sports are not to open up, we will not be paying the vendor. So they do understand that.
That was all.
Yeah, we did add some language in there for that.
Thank you, Rob.
Okay, item H4M.
Yes, this is the Navion software agreement. I was concerned the last time that we approved this agreement that the software would not be implemented or utilized, and I have been asking parents frequently at the middle school level whether or not their child has even heard of this software, and none of them had. So it's clearly not being utilized at the middle school level. I'm glad to see that this eliminates the middle school level. My question then becomes, is anyone other than the Vintage High School staff using this program, since it obviously was not getting used at the middle school?
I'm going to have Assistant Superintendent Pat Andrew Jennings, if you could please answer that.
Yes, I can speak to that. When we pulled the usage report, actually, you're correct. The middle schools, for the most part, had very limited usage. American Canyon Middle School actually stood out there and actually used it more than some of the high schools. The other high schools are all using it to some degree. It really comes into play in junior and senior year when students are researching colleges and applying, and that's where more usage happens during those grades. I have about 1,400 logins from American Canyon High School, about almost 3,000 at Napa High, and over like almost 4,500 at Vintage. And then Valley Oak and New Tech also used it to some degree.
And can I just add that when my children were, again, as Pat said, juniors and seniors, David, they used that platform quite consistently. It was very effective.
And I would also add, I think that training for Naviance happened on the October Professional Learning Day. And so counselors all received additional training with Naviance in October. And so I think that also increased the usage this year. I don't think that it had the same impact in middle school. And that's why middle school was removed from this year's contract, or from next year's contract.
Okay. So it sounds like the high schools are starting to adopt and utilize the program then. That's encouraging.
Okay, item H4R, or excuse me, I take that back. H4U.
So this is the approval of the Dreambox Learning. So I just had to get some clarification here. It appears that we have multiple programs for math remediation or supplementation. We've got Fast Math, some places have GG Math, and now we're adding Dreambox. It seems like they kind of all do similar things. How is this program different? And what are the success stories of the various programs? Because it seems like the ones that we've been using have really not been moving the needle on our math scores. You know, our math scores haven't been improving.
Ms. Jennings, can you answer that, please?
Absolutely. Dreambox is a K-8 adaptive math software program, and it provides like differentiated instruction for differentiated support for students K through 8. We are school sites are no longer using ST Math, which is also known as GG Math. They're actually the same program. GG is actually the name of the penguin in ST Math, and so some kids refer to it as GG Math. So that's actually one and the same program. We are no longer using that. We are still using, some schools are still using Fast Math, and Fast Math is sort of like electronic flashcards. It just works for computation, whereas Dreambox will provide far more information regarding where students are and then give them practice at their level. Also, just as a point of information, we are no longer going to be using the math inventory in the elementary grades, so that Dreambox will replace that piece in terms of assessment information.
Okay. Thank you for illuminating that.
Hey, I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of difficulties with the video, but moving on, H4B.
And this was about Rosetta Stone. And so I guess my question here is also tied in with H4W. Both of these things say that they are for a similar purpose, to increase language acquisition. And so I was wondering, what is the difference between the two programs, who uses it, and what is the success rate of these programs? Are they overlapping to do the same thing?
So Rosetta Stone is more geared toward our secondary students who maybe enter our schools older, so that it's more geared to like young adult sort of in terms of the layout and how it goes about instructing students in language acquisition. Imagine Learning is geared from, like, there's Imagine Learning, it's called Language and Literacy, from TK to about 8th grade. And so it provides support for our English learners who are at various levels in their language development. In the past, we've had Imagine Learning for our levels 1 and 2s only. And this year we're shifting because of the success of that to make it available to all of our English learners in our K through 8 schools.
Okay, thank you for that explanation.
You're welcome.
So it sounds like you might be ready for a motion to approve all the loose bits that weren't covered in the first motion.
I think that's right. So if that's your motion, I'll second it, or I'll make the first motion, whatever.
President Martin, you're muted.
Okay, I will take Joe's and then David's. All those in favor, or excuse me, roll call.
Trustee Martin?
Aye.
Trustee Gonzalez Mares?
Aye.
Trustee Jankowicz?
Aye.
Trustee Water?
Aye.
Trustee Hurtado?
Aye.
Trustee Shank?
Aye.
Trustee Gracia.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. I am moving on to presentations and discussion. Is that correct? Okay. I-1A, Napa Valley Unified School District Bond Feasibility Presentation.
So, Manny, we have to promote, we have Larry Tramatola, and Larry, will Tim from True North also be a presenter?
Yes.
Okay, can we please promote True North, Manny?
Just found him, Dr. Massetti.
Okay, there he is. Okay, and can you please show the presentation slides? Okay, so tonight we have Mr. Larry Tramatola and Dr. Timothy McLarney from True North, who will be presenting the results of the bond feasibility study that the district recently conducted. Dr. McLarney, Mr. Tramatola.
Yeah, just so you know, I can't start the video. I have a note because the host has stopped it, which is fine. I don't need to be on video. I've been following your meeting and very much enjoyed it. As you know, one of the things we wanted to do was just to find out with the survey what voters felt about the possibility of a potential bond for November. There was a feeling that we wanted to get a better sense. We had a sense of what the needs of the community or what the needs of the district were, but we had no sense really of what the public was willing to support. So True North, led by Dr. Tim McLarney, has done the survey, and rather than waste a lot more time in prep of this, why don't I just turn this over to Tim?
Thank you, Larry. Good evening, Tim McLarney with True North Research, and tonight I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation which is being run on your side that covers the highlights of the bond feasibility survey. As I go through the slides, I welcome questions from the board as I go or at the end if there are any. Okay, so next slide, please. So before we actually talk about the results of the survey, helpful to take a moment to talk about the purpose of the study or why we did the research, as well as the methodology or how we went about conducting the study. In terms of the purpose, this study was really designed to sort of answer three overarching questions. The first is feasible for the November 2020 ballot. And what I mean by that is if the board were to take action to place this measure on the November ballot, does it have a reasonable chance of success, right? Answer to that question always yes. Sometimes we look at the data and we just don't see that there's a clear path to get you from where you are today to where you need to be to have a reasonable chance of success on election day. And when that's the case, we'll tell you that. If we did find feasibility, the second question that we're trying to address is how would you go about structuring this measure in a way that is consistent with the type of measure your community is interested in supporting. There's a lot of components to a bond program, including the various projects and improvements that would be funded. And so the survey gives us some guidance about that, as well as tax rate sensitivity and other issues. And then finally is an opportunity to understand, the important role that information might play with voters in terms of building awareness related to this measure, as well as helping them understand kind of what this measure would accomplish. I'm a firm believer that if a school district's going to take the step of putting a bond on the ballot, it's really incumbent upon you as a district to help inform voters about the choice that you're asking them to make, right? So next slide, please. So in terms of the methodology, conducted in May of this year, we used what's called a stratified and clustered random sample, which I can get into the details of it if you like, but suffice to say that ensures that we have a sample that is in fact representative of your likely November universe on all the dimensions that are related to voting behavior. And we had set out to do 400 interviews, but we wound up walking back in the door with 625, right? One of the silver linings to the current environment we find ourselves in is that more people are staying home, more people have more time on their hands. more people were willing to talk. And so we just had much better productivity in the survey than we had anticipated. And so that just allowed us to come back with more completed interviews. We used what's called a mixed method approach, meaning we recruited using both phone and email, and we allowed respondents to participate either by phone or online at a password protected website. Now, because this was a random sample of 625 voters and not a census of all of your likely voters, it has what's known as a margin of error due to sampling. And in this case, that's just under 4%, it's 3.9%. What that means is we can be 95% confident that the results we'll talk about tonight are within 3.9% of what we would have found had we spoken with all of your likely November 2020 voters. Next slide, please. So on to the results. This first slide shows the results of what we call the importance of issues question. And for each of the issues you see there on that slide, we simply ask voters to tell us how important it is to them. We like this question because it's a nice warm up, just kind of gets voters thinking about local issues, but it's also an opportunity for us to understand how the topic of education stacks up against some of these other issues that also compete for tax dollars, things like maintaining local streets and roads and improving public safety. And in particular, how does the issue of improving the quality of education in local schools stack up against preventing local tax increases? Generally speaking, the higher they rate the issue of improving the quality of education in local schools relative to the issue of preventing local tax increases, the better position the district is to move forward with some type of bond or tax measure related to education. And you can see here that in your community, the number one issue in the community was in fact improving the quality of education. You had 85% say that's extremely very important, followed by creating jobs and improving the local economy, preparing for emergencies and natural disasters, et cetera. As you go down the list, you get all the way to the bottom, you see preventing local tax increases, right? And there's almost a 30-point gap in the importance between those two items. That's a sizable gap. That's generally what we like to see when we are doing this kind of poll. It tends to bode well for the feasibility of a measure. The other thing I'll point out, though, is if you look one up from preventing local tax increases, you see the issue of repairing and upgrading aging school facilities. So quite a bit further down the list from improving the quality of education in local public schools, right? And it suggests that there's a bit of an awareness gap between how your facilities in particular relate to that top item there, right? And that normally we wouldn't see a gap that large. And so there's a bit of a disconnect in voters' minds between, on the one hand, how important they view improving the quality of education, and on the other hand, an awareness of perhaps where your current facility needs are or how they connect, these improvements would connect to that issue. Next slide, please. I'm going to be brief on this one. One of the concerns about the November ballot was there was going to be a measure on that ballot called split roll, where they were going to change how Prop 13 applies to commercial and industrial properties in California. I learned, I think today, that measure has been pulled. And so we had tested, we had some arguments about this measure right up front in the survey with half your voters because we wanted to make sure that we had some sense of how that discussion related to the split roll measure, which we expected to be sort of the battle royale of the November election, how that might impact how voters view your bond. You can see here the support level for the split roll measure wasn't great. Only a little over a third of voters said they would support it, and just as many opposed. And we did find that discussion did have some impact on how voters viewed your proposal. Again, this measure, as my understanding, has been pulled from the ballot. They're not going to be, that's not going to be on the ballot in November anyways. Next slide, please. So at this point, we get right to what we call the initial ballot test. The idea here is we want to present to voters a mock-up of what we think that 75-word ballot statement would look like and get their reaction. It's a good gauge of where your voters are at on the natural with respect to this proposal because we haven't shared with them any additional details about the bond beyond what you see here in the 75 words. So here's the 75 words, and the results are on the next slide. You can see that the initial ballot test, we had 47% of voters who said they would support the bond, 41% who were opposed, and about 12% who were not sure or preferred not to answer the question. In the state of California, for a Prop 39 bond to be successful, you need 55%. So at this initial ballot test, our support level is soft, right? It's below that 55% threshold by about 8 points. Next slide. So naturally, support for a bond measure can depend on the price tag, right? The tax rate. Generally speaking, the higher the tax rate, all other things being equal, the lower the level of support. We tested 3 different tax rates in this survey relative to your bond. One was a $50 per 100,000 assessed valuation tax rate. You can see that there we had about 36% support. At $40, we had 39% support. When the tax rate got to $30 per 100,000 assessed valuation, it checked in around 46% support. So we had a fair amount of fall off in support for the proposal when we were testing some of those higher tax rates. I will point out, though, that the nature of this question makes it a pretty conservative read on voter support for your proposal, mainly because we're putting the blinders on the respondent and we're not talking about what the bond will do. We're talking about the tax rate, and that has a tendency to sort of cool support down in general. The other reason is that when you convey the tax implications of a bond measure using statements like $50 per 100,000 assessed valuation, it requires a lot of a respondent to know what that really adds up to, right? They need to know what assessed valuation is as a concept. They need to know what the AV is for their property. They need to be able to do math on the fly in the space of an interview. And the end result is that there's some voters who, although they know you're talking about the price tag, they don't know exactly how it rolls up to a meaningful number. And those voters tend to hedge, right? They tend to say no or not sure instead of yes. And so on the next slide, we come at it a little differently. And we say, all right, next slide, please. If you knew that this measure would cost a typical homeowner $200 per year, would you vote yes or no? That's the left column. The $200 per year is the $50 per 100,000 of assessed valuation tax rate, multiplied times the median AV for residential property in your district. That's how you get to $200. And you can see that when you convey it that way, we do get better support, right? At the $50 tax rate, $50 per 100,000 assessed valuation, we had 36% support. When you do the math and you roll that up to $200 per year, support jumps up 11 points to 47%. On the right is the same exercise, only here we're taking that $30 per 100,000 assessed valuation tax rate, for which we had 46% support. We're multiplying that by the median AV. That's how you get to $120 per year. And when you convey it as $120 per year, we wind up around 53% support, right? So that bounces up about 6 points. And so what this tells us is there's a bit of confusion about what the tax rate when conveyed as a rate per 100,000 assessed valuation means, and that when you simplify it and just do the math for voters, you find that you're getting a considerably better reaction. That said, even when you convey it this way, that $50 tax rate, right, that landed at $200 per year, that still has us checking in about 7 points below the 55. So that tells us, both of those reads tell us that price tag's probably beyond what voters feel comfortable with, and they're looking for something closer around that $30 tax rate. Next slide, please. So at this point, we transition to what we call projects and programs. Here is where we're now going to start to educate the respondent more about what your bond will accomplish. Up to this point, they'd only had the 75-word ballot statement, and you can only say so much in 75 words about what the bond's going to do. Here, we get to unpack it into 2 tiers of projects. Here's the first tier. There's another tier behind this. And in doing that, we give them a better idea about what the bond is about. The other thing it allows us to do is to understand, of all the ways you could spend the money, which of these items sort of rise to the top of the list. And so you can see here at the top of the list, these three or four items that sort of stand out a bit from the ones on the lower part of the graph. Top one is career tech. That was the item that had the most favorability of everything we tested. Number 2 is STEM-related facilities. 3 is basic repairs to your older schools. You're talking about replacing roofs, plumbing, heating, ventilation systems where needed. And then the 4th is removing hazardous materials like asbestos and lead pipes from older schools, right? When you have older schools, you're going to encounter that stuff, and voters tend to prioritize that as being one of the top things that they'd like to do with bond funds, is to eliminate those hazardous materials from your sites. Next slide, please. I won't spend much time on this next slide other than to say we did test a whole second layer of projects as well. The main point is that even at the very bottom, right, well, in this case, it's about athletic facilities, and we tend to find that the further away you get from the classroom, the softer the support tends to be for projects. But even that item, you had better than 2/3 of voters say that they would favor spending some of the money on that item. So it's not unpopular, right? Everything you were thinking about doing with a bond measure is seen as valuable, right? It's just that some items sort of rise to the top of the list more so than others. Next slide, please. So if the board were to choose to place a measure on the November ballot, there is going to be an election cycle, right? And during that election cycle, you'll have advocates of this measure will stand up and talk to their neighbors and friends and fellow voters and explain why this measure is needed and why they should vote yes. You might also have some opponents, people who step up and say this is a bad idea, we shouldn't be doing it, and here's why. For this to be a reliable gauge of the feasibility of a bond measure, we need to simulate that type of discussion and debate in the space of the interview so that we not only know where voters are on the natural, which was that initial ballot test, but what happens to their support for your bond after they hear both positive and negative arguments, like they're going to hear during the election cycle. So we test a series of positive arguments first, and you can see here that this is the top tier. You can see here that there a lot of these arguments, resonate with, a majority of the voters and some beyond that into 2/3. At the top of the list is an equity argument, right? That our students deserve to have the same educational opportunities as others in the region, including high quality instruction in science, technology, and math. This bond will help improve the quality of education in local schools. Second item there was really about the age of your facilities and that most of your schools were built more than 60 years ago. Sorry, I've got a cattle dog here that just ran out the door and barked. And that it's time to make these kind of upgrades. And the third one was just the idea that all the money stays local, right? It can't be taken away by the state of California or used for other purposes. So next slide, please. Okay, so after this slide, I'm not going to spend time on this, but at this point in the poll, voters have heard a lot more about this proposal than they did at the initial ballot test, right? We talked in detail about the tax rates. That's kind of a wet blanket. That tends to depress support for a bond measure. But then when we got a chance to come back, talk about the projects that could be funded, we talked about positive arguments. And so on the next slide, we circle back to them and we say, okay, now that you've heard a bit more, where do you stand? And you can see that support for the measure kind of ticks up a bit from where we were initially. Now it's sitting at about 50%. Which is 3 points higher than we started, still about 5 points lower than we need, though, to be successful with a Prop 39 bond. And then next slide. Then we get to the negatives. And the idea behind the negatives is I'm going to put on my opposition hat. I'm going to anticipate what an opponent of this bond might say, and we convey these negative arguments to the voters. We did not pull any punches, right? Our goal in this section is to do as maximum damage in terms of trying to persuade voters not to support the proposal, because we need to have a realistic understanding of how resilient is voter support for your proposal if you get into an election cycle and you get opposition during that cycle. So you can see here that some of the negative arguments get some traction. The number one is just the idea that this is not a good time to be raising taxes. People are having a hard time making ends meet. The economy's in a recession, right? Just a bad time. But the real question is what happens after, right? After you convey the negatives, we go to the next slide. We go to the final ballot test. Here's where we present to them once again that 75-word ballot statement and get their reaction. You can see that the negatives cool us down about 2 points. And so we land just a little bit above where we started, right? We started at 47, we got to 50, and now we're back down at 48 based on the negatives. Next slide, please. So one other question that we asked, sort of aside from all the questions related to the bond measure, was where they think the economy is headed in the next 6 months, right? In 6 months down the line, do they think the economy is going to be better than today? Think it's going to be worse than today? Think it's going to be about the same as today? And as you can see here, you have almost an even balance of folks in each one of these categories, right? About a third think it's going to be better, about a third think it's going to be worse, and about 29% think it's going to be about the same. We wanted to have this question because the answers to how people answer this question could sometimes color how they feel about a local bond or tax measure. So next slide. So 2 more slides, just wrapping up. What does all this mean? I'm going to circle back first to that overarching sort of first bullet question that I mentioned at the outset as being a main motivator for why we do this type of research, which is to answer that question is it feasible to put a bond on the November ballot? Meaning, if you were to put that measure on the ballot for November, do we think it's going to have a reasonable chance of success? Based on the poll results, we do not recommend putting a bond on the November ballot. The support level just never really got to the level we would feel comfortable making that recommendation. I feel the chances of it failing would be considerably higher than the chances of it succeeding, given we have a very short amount of runway and some other factors I'll mention here in a second. So that said, though, there are some positive signs from the survey, right? We saw that voters considered improving the quality of education in local schools to be the most important issue facing the community, right? And so it's kind of an odd result in some ways that that's the #1 issue in the community, and yet the support level for the bond was a bit tepid, right? And so I'll elaborate on that in a second. We did see that the things that you're proposing to do in terms of facility improvements were popular. And we also saw that when you conveyed positive arguments about the proposal and why it's needed, that got some traction with some voters. And so there were some positive signs there. The problem is that I think the challenges are sort of stacked in a way that make it difficult to see November as being a good opportunity for a bond. One of the things is that disconnect I mentioned at the outset between, there seems to be with voters a disconnect between, on the one hand, their passion for improving the quality of education in local schools, and on the other hand, how low they rated the importance of improving and repairing aging school facilities. There seems to be a disconnect that maybe they don't understand where your facility needs are at, right, or conditions are at, or they're not connecting the dots between how improvements to your facilities are really instrumental to helping you improve the quality of education in local schools. And so that's a challenge. We saw some tax rate sensitivity and some confusion around the tax rate. That's a challenge. We saw in some of the negatives, there would be some concerns about how the money might be spent. In particular, you have, areas of your district that were supportive of this bond than other areas of the district. And so there were some geographic imbalances there that I think would need to be addressed. And then finally, November itself is shaping up to be, a pretty tumultuous election cycle, right? We're going to have probably a very bitter, hyper-partisan election at the national level. We also had concerns about that split roll measure. Turns out that's not going to be on the ballot. But I think we can all kind of look ahead to this November election cycle, and if it's anything like last year, it's going to be a bit of a whirlwind, right? And so that presents some challenges in and of itself as well. And so based on that stack of challenges relative and the sort of softness of the support for the bond, we don't recommend going in November. Next slide, please. Now, that said, there are some other points I want to make, which is it's important to keep in mind that a poll like this is a snapshot in time, right? It's not saying that in the future, that's where voters are going to be with respect to this proposal, right? It kind of tells you where they are right now. And in particular, I think the 2020 election year has proven to be a particularly stormy year. And we've had a few of those before, right? We've had a few elections where it just wasn't a good environment to be placing a measure on the ballot. The nice thing is storms blow through, right? After those really sort of tumultuous election cycles, we tend to have better weather for subsequent elections. And so part of the art of, ultimately being successful with a measure like this is, knowing when to stand down, right? And knowing when you're ready to put it on the ballot. And I think with that in mind, we want to be in a position in the future, or the district should be in a position in the future, so that when a good election environment shows up, you're ready. A lot of the recommendations we have there in the bullets below that are centered around communications, right? It seems to me when you look at this data that there's just some, basic outreach, education, and communication that should happen with your voters on a number of items here that I mentioned. And so, this I think is really instrumental to kind of building up a foundation with your voters, such that, in a future election, because your needs aren't going to go away, you're in a good position to move forward with a bond measure. And then finally, the tax rate. We asked for $50 for this bond. And just based on the tax rate sensitivity we saw in this proposal, it might be that, your future bonds, instead of having one big bond, every so many years, a lot of districts are shifting to the smaller bonds, but a little more frequently, right? So they're getting it in bite-sized chunks over time as opposed to trying to do one large bond at one point. So with that, I end my presentation. I welcome any questions from the board if there are any.
Before we move forward with questions, I'm going to open it up for public comment. Manny, do we have any public comment?
Yes, we do. Adriana.
Hello, I just had a quick question. If there was any thought given to doing a parcel tax versus a bond measure as far as funding for the schools?
Adrian, not at this time.
Okay.
Right now we were researching the feasibility of a bond.
I have a comment. In listening to the presentation, I guess my takeaway is that we need some very structured community outreach and education. We will continue to work hard to earn the trust of our community and work toward a mutual understanding of the benefits associated with the bond issuance. I agree that the economic uncertainty may have driven some of the poll responses, but I do believe there are concerns regarding how those bond dollars have been spent. Investment in school facilities have direct and indirect effects on student outcomes and cyclical effects on our local community's overall quality of life. And I feel strongly that we need to communicate that. Direct effects we know are, mental and physical health, which are directly related to student academic outcomes. Indirect effects, permitting more money to be directed toward classroom instruction, more adequate facilities can even improve teacher satisfaction and retention. I mean, the list goes on, and he covered it so well. But I think we need to create a space and an opportunity to have this dialogue with the community. And I think we need to start today because it's important to understand the correlation between facilities and education, as well as student outcomes and community-based funding. And I don't know that we've had those direct conversations in a number of years. So that would be my hope.
I have a question and a comment, if I may. One, I agree with everything that Trustee Jankowicz said. And there's certainly, and we've been talking about equity, and there is certainly spectacular inequity in our facilities. The difference between between some of our high schools, for example, we have a show place, frankly, in American Canyon, and we have a couple of high schools up here in Napa that certainly are showing their age. So this is something that people need to think about. You said that you surveyed likely voters. I think I know the answer, but for the sake of our audience, could you tell us what a likely voter is?
Sure. A likely voter is somebody who we expect to cast a ballot in the November 2020 election. That represents a very large chunk of your registered electorate because it's a presidential general election. It's going to have the highest turnout of any normal election in a four-year cycle. And we choose people based on when they registered, what their demographics are of the elections that they've had opportunities to participate in the past, which ones have they cast ballots, right? And if in doubt, we tend to pull somebody in as opposed to exclude them, right, in the sample, because as good as the algorithms are, they're never perfect, right? And so we tend to pull a slightly broader audience with the idea that, I'd rather keep people in the tent than put someone out who I think ultimately is going to cast a ballot.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to echo Trustee Jankowicz's statements that I think we do need to develop and improve a plan for communicating with our community. I would like to see some sort of coherent strategy brought together to sort of extol the benefits and really engage with people. I think that there were several bond measures in the past that maybe put a little bit of a sour spin in some people's minds, that overpromised and underdelivered. So I think there's a perception out there that we have to combat in order to be successful in bringing a bond in the future. So I would urge a concentrated and thoughtful communication strategy moving forward.
This is Larry. I might Tramatola. For some reason, I'm frozen out of your being the video, but that's okay. This poll to me was one of the most intriguing polls that I've looked at in 20 years, to be honest with you. Your numbers in terms of projects and programs were off the chart. The arguments were strong, yet they didn't move people. That's because, there we go. That was because there's something that's going on in this community, and partly perhaps because of history, that needs to be recognized. I totally agree you need a aggressive communication plan, but part of that communication plan I think is to listen. It's more than us telling people what we think they want to hear. And we have good arguments, but we need to listen to them to be able to really understand what they're saying and what their concerns are. There is no reason these poll results should be what they are, given the importance of education in the community, given the arguments that all resonate. So that's something in terms of a communication plan, we have to listen. The other thing that we've had benefit of, and before Tim made this recommendation, we've got a lot of that. We recommend going forward or not, and obviously we were together on that we shouldn't, and we were strong, and that we need to do a communication plan. But part of that is we looked at some of the subsets of voters. You have a problem with parents, which really surprised me, that parents aren't supporting this at the level they need to support. So there's a first target that we have to do. Obviously, we need to reach voters in various communities in Napa and American Canyon because they're different communities and stuff. And we also have Republicans and independents are such a big portion of the electorate. We also need to reach out to them, and that's not an easy sell. But again, I think we have to listen. So I'm going to come back to you, to the board, with a very, I hope, thorough and sophisticated communication plan, so we can use this poll as a stepping stone for better communications and better listening to people, and then use it to build support so that we can move forward at some time in the near future.
Thank you.
I have a quick, and maybe it's a comment, but like, how do we use the positives to our advantage in the future? Like, I know that we're talking about creating this program, but you had some positives. Go ahead.
You know, I think part of it is that let's take a look at subsets. If I look at parents as a subset of this total universe, they don't get that what you're proposing may benefit their schools. It may benefit other schools, but I don't see how it's going to benefit mine. We need to make that connection for them. We need to sit down with them. We need to sit down with the principals, teachers, and others and listen in terms of what they need, and also be able to explain what's in the potential plan. Knowing, of course, that you can't do everything that you want to do. So that's one target. For whatever reason, voters in Napa believe, and Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, because you're more focused on this than I am, but I believe the folks in Napa, be they parents or not, don't believe their tax money has been spent in Napa. Now, that's a perception. It may not be true, but there is a belief that they haven't gotten their fair share of what has been voted on in the past. That's our reality. We can't change that. All we can do is to develop a plan on moving forward.
Right. And when you guys conducted this, is there any way to find out like economically disadvantaged families, you know, or is it just you pick names? How do we know?
So, and I apologize, I lost audio for a good 4 minutes there. So if you were talking to me, I didn't hear it.
All I asked
I can see Larry moving, so I think Larry was talking, but so we have we can certainly look at all sorts of subgroups with the polling and get an understanding of how different subgroups have different attitudes or interests, as well as their different levels of support for the bond. The thing that struck me is even groups that are traditionally very supportive of these measures, right? They're the ones you count on to carry these bonds over the finish line. So we're talking about younger voters, we're talking about Democrats, we're talking about dual Democrat households, right? Democrats who live with other Democrats, they tend to be your most progressive voters. Oftentimes in communities, the last few years when I do this poll, you could always count on that group to be at 75% plus in terms of support for the bond. And even those groups were checking in around 60, right? So we weren't seeing, it's kind of this across the board low tide effect that we were seeing in the poll. And then there were certainly some groups that were checking in really, really low. So unincorporated voters who live in incorporated areas of your district, I think we had about 1 in 5 who were willing to support the proposal. And so clearly there's some sort of disconnect with voters who are kind of out in these unincorporated areas, seeing a connection between this bond and the, a value to them in some way. And so I think as Larry pointed out, it's one of the more intriguing polls because I do this a lot, right? I mean, we've done over 400 bonded tax measures, and your poll numbers are unusual, and what they suggest is, yeah, there's something else going on there in terms of a basic disconnect, a lack of awareness, and kind of a need to get out and communicate and start to build some of that understanding with the community.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, additional comments?
I'd like to say a few things. So I want to thank Larry and Tim for curating this really important information for us as a governance team and for the community and for the NVUSD leadership team at large. It's funny, Larry's talking about the importance of listening, and I really could not agree more. As the superintendent of schools, the importance of tuning in and listening and finding out what is at the root of the concerns and the challenges. I personally was not too shocked by the results. I just want to kind of frame the purpose of the feasibility study. I think people have heard me speak repeatedly around the fact that California public schools are underfunded. We have some of the worst funding in our country, and I've spoken about that repeatedly. And so that presents a challenge to all California public school systems, particularly, of course, around programming and the development of our workforce and the retention of highly qualified teachers, which are the most transformational ingredient in terms of closing the gaps for our students and bringing them tremendous opportunity through educational excellence. But we also know that facilities play a critical role. And we have a lot of very old facilities in NVUSD. And the bottom line is that the state does not fully fund what it takes to educate our students, nor to deal with the maintenance issues and the developing facility issues that are constantly emerging. The state does not take care of that because of the fact that California public school systems continue to be underfunded. So because of that, most California public schools find themselves in the conundrum of having to rely on local measures to close those funding gaps. And these bond measures allow school districts, local school districts, to come out to their community and rely on them for that. And I am very, very grateful that I walked into a school district that supported Measure H over my, almost 2 years here. Measure H has done some transformational work for a lot of our kids. It did a phenomenal job at closing many of the technology gaps. So there have been tremendous accomplishments in Measure H. But I also, upon arrival as the new superintendent, did engage in a 90-day listening and learning tour. And when I engaged in that 90-day listening, learning, and tour that led to us birthing our strategic action plan, of which this work is related to Goal 4 around efficient, proactive asset management, I did learn that there was mistrust in the school district between the community and the school district in terms of our ability to steward dollars effectively, whether that was general fund dollars, restricted dollars or bond dollars. That surfaced as a theme. And so what this data shows me, it's not discouraging. It's actually really, really motivating, I think, for me and my team to have a real honest assessment of where the community still is around that ability to trust our school district to steward the dollars appropriately. And to me, it's a call to a challenge. We've only been here, me, my team, some have only joined in the last couple of months, our new chief business official a year, Mike Pearson in his new position a year as he oversees a lot of the school planning and construction and facilities work. It is clear that it takes more than a year or two to build that trust between the community and the school district. And so this is affirming, this is a call to action for my team and I think for the trustees. And I think it's through the continuous, consistent work that we will build that trust that in the future will position us to be able to hopefully pursue a local measure that can close that funding gap for the kids in the Napa Valley Unified School District. Not only today, because we know that facilities investments don't only serve the students of today, but they also serve the students of tomorrow. And some people might ask, well, why are we even testing for feasibility? If you knew that, Dr. Musetti, I'm just gonna let the community know, I'm gonna let the board know. I believe it is our responsibility in the positions that we hold to assess for that local feasibility, because we do have to continuously problem solve the California public school funding gap issue. And so I feel that it is best practice to assess for that feasibility with frequency, get the data, and then work really hard in response to that data in order to accomplish things for kids. So this is a very student-centered decision. Even though it might feel removed from students, it's all about students. And so we look forward to taking this data and working with it over the course of the next couple of years, and working closely with our consultants to help us put an execution plan together, of course, initially focused on listening and effective communication to move our district forward as we build that trust and become able to pursue measures with more confidence. So I just want to thank you for giving us that data.
Thank you very much, Larry and True North Research, for all your work. Thank you.
Have a good evening.
You too. Okay. Moving on to I-1B 2020-21 budget presentation.
Mr. Ruiz, if you could please start the slideshow. Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss NVUSD's budget for the 2020-21 school year. Next slide, please. As background, the California Ed Code 42131 requires the Napa Valley Unified School District to submit a budget and two certified financial interim reports per year. The budget period covers a period from July 1, 2020 through June 30th, 2023. The purpose of these reports and projections is to outline our budget, which is our financial plan for the next 3 years, and determine whether or not the district will be able to meet its financial obligations. Districts are required to certify one of 3 statements: positive certification, qualified certification, or negative certification. Tonight, I will be recommending to the board a positive certification. Next slide, please. So this side, it shows a summary of our general fund budget. And so the first thing to remember from this slide, it is very conservative on the revenue side. So when you typically adopt a budget, the revenues are not really clear the type of revenue you get or the amount of revenues, while the expenses are very clear. We know that the cost of stirs and PERS are going up. We know that we have step and column. However, when you look at the revenue side, there's a great deal of uncertainty, especially this year. So in this year, we know it was a highly unusual year due to COVID-19. The governor had originally proposed a budget that included a cut of revenues between 8 and 10%, depending on how you look at it or whether you include the COLA. We know as of Monday that a budget agreement was reached that does not have that cut in there. This budget that you see here before you today, it is built on the conservative model, which has the governor's May revise cut in it. The cut was so deep that actually we received more money under the basic aid model, which I will discuss a little bit further on in the slideshow. You can see under this model that there is very significant deficit spending, which is something that you always want to watch for in the base year. However, this is mitigated for the most part due to the fact that we will receive additional revenues. I will be adjusting our revenues up at first interim. Next slide, please. So there are structural funding issues in California. All school districts in California have structural issues that cause expenses to increase every single year. Things like step and column. In Napa Valley Unified, it's equal to about 2.1%. STIRS and PERS rates are also expected to increase for the foreseeable future, even though there is a temporary pause. Special education is woefully underfunded. In terms of Napa Valley Unified School District, we contribute approximately $23.7 million to special education. The vast majority of this is employee-related costs. So when you go back to my first two bullets, you see that STIRS and PERS are going up, step and column is going up. So part of the reason that you see special education costs consistently going up is related to employee-related costs. Declining enrollment is also very significant. For every 100 students that you lose in enrollment, you lose approximately $1 million in revenues. In Napa Unified School District's case, we typically lose between 150 and 200 students in a normal year. These structural issues make it difficult for all school districts in California to continue to offer the best education possible without annual increases to revenues. Next slide, please. COVID-19, the pandemic, has caused an unprecedented impact on both the state and the national economy. Some economic forecasts projected gross domestic product, or the total value of all goods and services produced in an economy, to decline by 26.5%. And to put that into perspective, gross domestic product declined by 25% during the Depression from 1929 to 1933. Now, right now, we're not really no one really knows or has a crystal ball what the exact impact is. I'm sure we've all noticed just driving around, there's more people on the road, and it's starting to feel like people are spending, but this is a temporary state. We could easily kind of swing back into a closure around the economy. So we need to be very conservative with our expenditures going forward. Next slide. This year, again, it was an unusual year. Usually it may revise the governor's proposal and the legislator. There are some things that they work out, but they're just not usually vastly apart. So again, going back to May revise, the governor proposed a 10% reduction under local control funding formula. Very, very large deferrals. Essentially what a deferral is we book the revenues in this fiscal year. The government moves the revenues into the next fiscal year. It allows them to balance the budget. What this does is it shifts tremendous.
I think we lost Rob.
Oh. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I could hear him the whole time.
This shifts tremendous costs to school districts as a result of those deferrals. School districts have to borrow money in order to make their payroll. In Napa Valley Unified School District's case, we just recently borrowed $37.4 million in our tax revenue anticipation note. If deferrals come to play, like we're projecting, we anticipate that we'll need to borrow approximately between $20 and $30 million in the spring. The legislature has submitted their own budget, which initially proposed a 2.31 cost of living adjustment. However, where we sit right now, we do know that there was an agreement that was made where there's no cost of living adjustment and there's no cut compared to last year. Absent receiving additional revenues more than what's proposed, there will be enormous cuts. And so, as you know, we are receiving additional revenues. And just to kind of point something out to the audience, this slideshow was prepared last week when a lot of this knowledge just was not known. We are required to submit our budget and post this online. There was some very recent information. Next slide, please. So the cuts were so deep for Napa Valley Unified School District, we actually received more money under the basic aid model. As a lot of people in the audience knows, Napa Valley Unified School District is the only school district in Napa County that is not a basic aid school district. A basic aid school district means that the school receives more money in property taxes than the state offers via Prop 98. These situations generally happen when you have an economic expansion where property values continue to go up. However, when you have cost of living adjustments go down, it tends to accelerate this impact or this line that you cross where you become a basic aid school district. And so right now, given that we are kind of back online to getting no cuts and a zero COLA, we are no longer a basic aid school district. We were initially a basic aid school district under the May revise. However, we very well could be having this discussion in the next 2 to 3 years. Should cost of living adjustments be flat or the cuts come up in the near future while property values continue to rise, we could very well pop back into being a basic aid school district in the very near future. Next slide, please. This slide shows our enrollment history going back to 2014-15. What this slide shows is it shows some of the very, very hard work we've been doing working with our partners and our charters. So our charter, we have 2 charter schools that recently became part of the school district. We welcome both River Charter School and very recently NVLA. You can see with the combined enrollment that was added as a result of these 2 schools that became district schools, it essentially wiped out our decline in enrollment going back to 14-15. However, this is simply a delay. We know that our decline in enrollment is about 150 to 200 students. A lot of that is just due to a demographic shift in California where we have lower birth rates. And you couple that with Napa Valley being exceptionally expensive, it's very hard for families to raise children in Napa Valley. Next slide, please. This slide, what it shows is it compares our cost of living adjustment to our assessed value. Essentially what this slide shows is we've had very strong assessed value for our properties in Napa Valley. As a result, again, over time, 4.3% increase in assessed value over time, and average COLA looking at about 2.87%. And so again, if this kind of continues at this rate, we do anticipate that we'll be having discussions about being a basic aid school district in the very near future. Next slide, please. In terms of our historic fiscal condition, even though we have a board adopted policy of a 7.5% reserve, we have not been above this level since 2014. This is the result of expenditures being greater than revenues for most years and not reducing expenditures to address the significant decline in enrollment. In 2018-19, there was a positive shift in our financial health. As we made significant cuts to expenditures, our reserves started moving back towards 7.5%. However, due to the unprecedented impact of COVID-19 on the economy, our reserves are anticipated to trend downward. You know, again, given that we have a flat year, we're hoping that our reserves will move back into the correct direction. But we do know that for the very foreseeable future, the economy will slow down. So as long as the economy continues to slow, it will be difficult for all school districts to build up their reserves. We're going to continue to be stewards of our money here and trying to keep expenses under control. but it's definitely a challenge when you know that you will continue to get reduced revenues at the state level. Next slide, please. This is our historic reserves. Again, you can see that our board policy is 7.5%. Our reserves have dropped from 2014-15, hit a low of about 3.64%. And then again, we are trending upwards. Next slide, please. So budget assumptions, it's always really important to consider budget assumptions. Remember, a budget is simply a snapshot in time. In terms of the assumptions we put into the budget, we have put, again, very conservative assumptions on the revenue side. Step and column equal to 2.1% in terms of an expense. We will continue to need to make classified cuts. We'll need to continue through 2020, 2021 as the district right sizes staffing to match enrollment. No staffing cuts to certificated staffing are assumed in our budget in 2020, 2021, as there were very significant cuts during the last 2 years. And so, as you know, we've made very significant cuts on the certificated side, close to $6 million a year. For the next couple slides, or bullets there, I should say, these cuts that I have here, I am going to go over them pretty quickly because we do know that we have additional revenues. We do not anticipate that cuts this large are needed for the next 2 out years. These bullets were put into the budget at the time that we anticipated a 10% cut in revenues. Next slide, please. In terms of the state budget, they did reach a deal on Monday. There are very few details available. It appears that it's a hybrid between the governor's May revise and the legislator. However, again, it will result in greater revenues for Napa Valley compared to the basic aid model. Next slide. So some of the preliminary details, again, a 0% COLA instead of a negative. There is some hold harmless ADA language. And so what that means is our average daily attendance is frozen as of February 28th of this year. We do have a question about charter ADA. However, we do think it looks like it's going to go in our direction. The main question is that when we look at our ADA as of February 28th, Napa Valley Unified, the ADA from NVLA is not included in that. However, because they are part of our LEA and some of the language that we received in the trailer bill, we do anticipate that we'll be funded on the total of our ADA plus NVLAs. However, that is not certain. We're working on trying to find the exact answer to that and get that in writing. There will be some additional federal aid. Again, the governor is dependent on large amounts of federal aid in order to balance the budget. If we do not receive the federal aid, there will be large cash deferrals, which essentially means we'll stop receiving revenue from the state around January. And again, this may lead us to need to take out another tax revenue anticipation note. There's a modification to the LCAP, which gives us a greater flexibility. There was language specifically written into the budget to not allow certificated layoffs, and there are restrictions to certain classified layoffs, namely custodial, nutrition, and transportation. Next slide. In terms of our recommendations and next steps, we will align our budget to the adopted state budget. We're going to start that work now, but again, we will not be bringing an official adjustment until first interim. We'll be watching our revenues and cash very closely. Remember, cash is king. School districts don't get taken over for bad budgets. They get taken over because they run out of cash. So we'll be watching that very, very closely. And we are recommending a positive certification. And with that, that concludes my presentation, unless we have some questions.
I'd like to open for public comment before we open it to the board.
There are no public comments on this item, President Martin.
Thank you, Manny. Board, any questions?
Just one suggestion, that we make sure Rob's presentation gets added to agenda online.
We'll take care of that right now. It was hot off the press given the moving target of the budget this year.
So did have a comment and then a question. I'm deeply concerned by the large quantity of deficit spending as projected in this budget. Even with the potential of not being cut by 10%, we still are not likely to see most of that money just because of the way that the deferrals work. So we're probably going to be operating in a way that includes what feels like a 10% cut, even though it doesn't actually happen that way. And so it makes me uneasy to see such a large deficit spending. We're sort of wiping out the positive reserve building that we have been doing recently. Thankfully, we had that reserve to make this a possibility with this budget, but it makes me nervous to have gotten back down to close to that 3% threshold again. Having said that, I had a question. Is the charter money included in this budget as far as revenue, or just the expenses?
So again, this is the budget as like a May revised budget. So it is not based on ADA. So again, the big difference between a budget that's based on state aid and a budget that's based on the local control funding formula or ADA is a budget that's based on basic aid. It's the property taxes that you receive. Once we receive those property taxes for a charter school, we would give them a portion of those revenues. And so this budget assumes that, again, that our charter school, NVLA, is a district school, and we would receive those revenues under the basic aid model. However, when you start having discussions about being an LCFF model, all of those expenses are in there. And then now that we're no longer talking about a 10% cut, when we put the ADA numbers in the local control funding formula calculator, it will result in enough revenues that should wipe out the deficit spending that we're all concerned about. So we anticipate that we'll receive enough revenues under this new model that there will be zero deficit spending.
Additional questions? Okay, thank you so much for your presentation, Rob.
Thank you.
You're muted, Isela.
Sorry about that. We're moving on to J. J1A General Services. Approval and adoption of California School Board Association, CSBA recommended March 2020 policy updates. Are there any comments on this item?
There are no public comments on this item, President Martin.
Okay. Guys, I will accept a motion.
Well, I'll move the approval of this item.
Second.
I have a first by Mr. Jose Hurtado, a second by Mr. Joe Shunk. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Nays, abstention, motion carries. I'm sorry, I'm still giggling. J1B, nomination for Howard Yoon for the Napa Valley Register for California School Boards Association 2020 Golden Quill Award Resolution 20-46.
So moved.
I'm gonna have Rosanna say a few words for this item and the next.
Yeah, so before we move it, I just, Howard Yun is on, I think he's still there. Yes, Howard is still there. And so I know on behalf of the school board and myself, it's with a lot of enthusiasm and excitement that we move this resolution forward. This is one tiny step in what is a submission of materials to the California School Boards Association Awards Program. The Golden Quill, as it's noted in the resolution, recognizes exceptional quality in educational reporting. And I think our governance team, and I know a lot of the NVUSD staff and community, appreciate the high quality, fact-based, data-driven, and fair reporting that Howard does on behalf of the Napa Valley Register. And so we're excited to be submitting this nomination. It was very, very easy for me and the public relations team to be able to put together the submission materials to nominate Howard. So we don't know where it's going to go, Howard, with the California School Boards Association, but I know here at the local level, we want to congratulate you on the nomination. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything.
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations.
Yes, thank you, Howard. Congratulations. You've been following our work for some time. A lot to be said. So thank you and appreciate all that reporting.
And you stayed with us.
Yeah, he really has an icon. It's a lot of complex storytelling. So it's very complex and complicated, and does an exceptional job. Cindy, did you want to say something?
Well, you know, before I became a teacher, I worked on a small town newspaper, and a little smaller than this one. So I always enjoyed the reporters who covered the school district and other things. And Howard, we're going to continue to give you plenty of things to write about, I'm sure.
So I'd just like to echo the sentiments of my fellow trustees and say thank you for the good coverage that you have provided. It's very well written and well balanced.
Congratulations, Howard, for this nomination. Thank you.
Okay, so I need a first, a second, and then it's a roll call.
So moved.
Second.
A first by Ms. Robin Jankowitz and a second by Ms. Cindy Water. Roll call, please.
Trustee Martin?
Aye.
Trustee Gonzalez Mares?
Aye.
Trustee Jankowitz?
Aye.
Trustee Water?
Aye.
Trustee Hurtado?
Aye.
Trustee Shunk?
Aye.
Trustee Gracia?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. J1C, nomination of Trustee Joe Shunk for California School Boards Association 2020 Golden Gavel Award, Resolution 20-47.
I would like to say something,
Okay.
if it's okay. There's a high learning curve with this position, and my greatest opportunity in that learning has come from listening. I strive to hear what Joe says beyond his words. He weaves a story, gives historical perspective, and in turn creates relevance for every decision he makes. He formulates each decision thoughtfully, critically, and with the understanding of impact. He mentors us by displaying restraint, which is not always easy, and understanding boundaries, while educating us with the power of his questions. We have had the ultimate opportunity for governance training with Mr. Shunk. His balanced perspective, extensive knowledge, and willingness and ability to slice and dice data has made his contributions invaluable. He is not just deserving of this golden gavel, he embodies it, and I want to thank him very, very much.
Well said. Joe, we used to sit in the audience together, and I know I'd look up there and think, I could do this, and then you went up and did it first. And it was always fun sitting with you, whether on the dais or in the audience. And again, I'll echo what Trustee Jankowitz said. Joe, you're a great human being. You bring a real humanity. You understand our critics, people who are angry with us. You know, you give them credit. You help me understand them better. You've got apparently total recall, combined with a wonderful sense of humor too. And it's really fun working with you.
Joe, otherwise known as our historian, and just I think the historical value that you bring to the board is you know, it almost sounds like we're saying we're starting our goodbyes, so might as well little by little, because it's a lot to share about you, Joe. But I think you know, echoing what Trustee Jankowicz said and Water, you know, there's those individuals in our community that you know, unfortunately don't know who they're indebted to in terms of your time and your commitment and dedication to every single item, even before being on the board. And that is something that I've always admired. I don't know if I'll ever get to that point like you, Joe. That's what makes you so valuable, and why this community, and especially from the Napa Valley Unified School District family, who they're indebted to in terms of your stewardship and leadership and guidance through all this process. And so, you know, it's no surprise to me that this award in this nomination goes to you, Joe. So thank you on behalf of our families and our community and our NVUSD for everything that you've done.
I want to echo some of the sentiments of my fellow trustees and say that I too really appreciate the historical perspective that you often are able to supply to sort of give us a little perspective about how decisions were made or how a situation developed over time or came about. I really enjoy hearing to those stories to provide some context of how we got here that can really help make decisions moving forward.
And I'll just say, Joe, it's been an honor. And will continue to be until November, but certainly an honor to serve with you.
So I'd like to just read really quickly. Trustee Shunk was the president when I got hired not too long ago in July of 2018. It was very easy for our team to write to the submission, but I do, just for the public record, I won't read all of the submission materials, but I will read a little bit of the front summary that we submitted to the California School Boards Association. Trustee Joe Shunk has repeatedly demonstrated his willingness and ability to make difficult decisions in order to keep student achievement at the forefront of NVUSD's governance work. He has played a critical role in ensuring the 6 goals of the NVUSD strategic plan are accomplished on behalf of our students in our current cycle. He's a systems thinker who understands that through effective resource management, strong community engagement, definitely through impactful policy implementation, intentional human capital development, that the board actually has the capacity to positively impact student achievement. Trustee Joe Shunk takes a strong stand for California public schools. He often speaks publicly on the importance of public education and its potential to transform lives and communities. However, he's especially passionate about the need to implement highly effective special education programs for our students with disabilities. He's well aware of the issues our special education families and students face as they navigate our system. He holds our system accountable to improving our work in this area, and he remains committed to an asset-based approach to support our most vulnerable students. Trustee Shunk models professionalism, integrity, and ethics with his words, his actions, and his demeanor always as a trustee and a community member. He is respectful, trustworthy, and reliable. When he speaks on issues, all of us on the governance team listen closely because we know how much we can learn from him. He is our steady and guiding light in our moments of celebrating accomplishments and even during the toughest of times. As a school board member, Trustee Shunk has also demonstrated a commitment to continuously learn. He's attended the CSBA Annual Education Conference for several years. He served as a veteran leader during our own recent workshops led by our governance consultant. Despite his experience, he is always committed to improving his governance practice and attaining knowledge about school systems. Trustee Shunk most recently participated in our CSBA policy workshop and guided all of the revisions of all of our board bylaws. Trustee Shunk understands two of the critical principles of acting as a responsible board member as defined by CSBA. First and foremost, he understands that his function is not to manage, but rather to set strong direction, policy, and a vision for the district. And secondly, he understands the concept of team. He has helped us build a team. In fact, he builds a sense of team amongst the governing board often. He strategically balances his own individual perspectives with the representation of the board's comprehensive view. And for that, we thank him.
Before you say anything, Joe, you thought you were going to get let go easy. You haven't heard me. You're one of the main reasons why I ran. That conversation at Starbucks started something really special. So, oh well, you're still stuck with me. I do want to say that I'd be darned if you don't get that award. I'll go to Anaheim, even though I said I'd be doing a virtual conference this year, if I don't go and snatch it and bring it back for you. With that said, congratulations, because I feel that regardless if CSBA gives you that award, that you're well deserving of it. Congratulations.
I'm touched. I sometimes wonder if you guys listen to me because you're wondering what's going to come out of my mouth next. But I appreciate the warm thoughts and the nomination, and I'll enjoy it as such regardless of the remainder of the CSBA process. Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion.
Moved.
Robin, I got a first from Robin and a second from David Gracia. Roll call, please.
Trustee Martin?
Aye.
Trustee Gonzalez Mares?
Aye.
Trustee Jankowicz?
An enthusiastic aye.
Trustee Water?
Aye.
Trustee Hurtado?
Aye.
Trustee Shunk?
Aye.
Trustee Gracia?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So J2, Business and Operations. J2A, Napa Valley Unified School District COVID-19 LCAP report. Do I have any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments on this item, President Martin.
Okay, David, I'll take your first.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Jose Hurtado. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? Motion carries. J2B, Napa Valley Unified School District 2020-21 budget adoption.
I'll move for the approval of this item.
First by Mr.
I'll second.
Hurtado, second by Ms. Water. Is there any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments on this item, President Martin.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nays? Abstention? Motion carries. J2C, purchase of security cameras and installation services for 13 district sites.
I have a question on this before we get into the voting. Were these camera placements reviewed and approved by our security consultant?
Yes, they were.
Then I'll move to approve.
Second.
First by David Gracia and a second by Cindy Water. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Motion carries. J2D, annual Microsoft volume licensing renewal through SHI, new vendor.
So moved.
First by Mr. David Gracia.
Second.
Second by Jose Hurtado. Do I have any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments for this item, President Martin.
I have a quick question. Did we make a shift this year, or did I miss it in some prior year that we've moved to Office 365, which is subscription based?
No, we haven't. We have not shifted. So we are required to buy licenses for all of our users in the school district based on an enrollment. And so last year when we looked at the numbers, they seemed a little bit high in terms of cost. So we put a little extra time evaluating the vendor that we're currently using, along with that for all of the contracts coming out of the business and the technology department. And so we were able to recognize a small savings, but it's still significantly expensive to buy Microsoft. We have a number of employees that need to use it. So this isn't so much for our students, but it's more along the lines for all of our employees that need to use the Microsoft products.
Right. I know we had an enterprise license in the past, but this is the first time I remember seeing Office 365, but it could just be my memory is not as good as you all think it is.
We'd need to double check on that, Trustee Shunk.
Okay. It's not a big deal.
It's what Microsoft calls their latest version of the Office suite is Office 365, but it's basically the installed version. It covers the installed version along with the cloud version, which is, I believe, what you're referencing, Trustee Shunk.
Right. But the subscription means is we'll see a number like this every year, because it's subscription based as opposed to every couple of years when they come out with a new version of the Office suite.
Yes, this is just for annual license renewal.
Yeah.
Manny, do I have any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments for this item, President Martin.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstentions? Nays? Motion carries. Okay, J2E, webcam purchase for Promethean boards from STS.
So moved.
Second.
I have a first by Mr. David Gracia and a first by Mr. David Gracia, second by Mr. Jose Hurtado. Do I have any public comment on this item?
I only had a question. Is this for all of our Promethean boards?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
We do have a public comment for this item, President Martin.
Okay.
Adrian Boudreau.
Okay.
Adrian?
Hello. Just real quickly, approval for the webcams for usage. I'm imagining it's for distance learning. I'm just wondering if it might be a little premature to approve that kind of purchase when we're not quite sure what the instructional model is going to look like in the fall. So that was all.
Am I allowed to answer that question?
You can clarify.
Yeah, to provide clarification, this is not intended for distance learning. We had always intended on putting webcams on all of the Promethean boards. It adds a certain level of flexibility for teachers. So for example, even when you have, when we reopen schools in the fall, if teachers, for example, want to participate in a virtual field trip or communicate with other classrooms, it's an excellent tool that they can use in the classroom. If we were to go to distance learning that involves a camera, these cameras would not satisfy this need, because as you would think about where they're placed, it'd be placed on the Promethean board. Teachers would be walking back and forth in front of it. If we were to use something with cameras in the classroom, these would not satisfy the need. It would be something completely different.
Thank you, Adrian, for your comments. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Motion carries. J2F, purchase of identity automation software, licensing, support, and professional services.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
So I have a first by Mr. David Gracia, a first by Mr. David Gracia, and a second by Elba Gonzalez Mares. Any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments for this item, President Martin.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Nays? Abstention? Motion carries. J2G, authorization to lease 20 copy machines from, how do you pronounce this copy machine? Is that H silent? Rico?
Rico.
Okay.
Second.
A first by Mr. David Gracia, a second by Jose Hurtado. Do I have public comment on this item?
There are no public comments for this item, President Martin.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Nays? Abstention? Motion carries. Okay, J3, Human Resources. J3A, request to hire teachers less than fully credentialed.
I'll move.
Second.
I think we had a public comment email to this item.
We did. So just for the record, we did receive a message in writing today at 7:57 a.m. from the Napa County Latinx Democratic Club. The subject was this item, and that letter has been forwarded to the school board.
Thank you. So I have a first by Mr. David Gracia, the second by whom? I'm sorry. Elba?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments for this item, President Martin.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Nays? Abstention? Motion carries. J3B, adoption of BP board policy, 4119.24, maintaining appropriate adult-student interactions.
I wanted to comment before we vote. I maintain still, despite the fact that, you know, legal has approved this, that there is this vague idea that a third party could interpret something to thereby make it an inappropriate interaction. I just don't feel like it's well presented or defined, and that it would be very litigious and problematic. So I don't like that language and don't think that it's appropriate as part of our policy.
Is there certain parts that are not okay, or is it the whole thing?
No, it's just that one part that allows a third person observer to somehow cause the interaction of someone to then become a violation of this policy. And, you know, I just think it's very vague and, you know, will be difficult to appropriately implement. I think the rest of the policy is otherwise fine.
I think the part of the policy is this policy applies during the outside of normal school hours, on weekends and breaks, both on and off campus, whenever and wherever the adult is interacting with students in their role as a district employee, contractor, coach, or volunteer, or could reasonably be perceived as others as such. I think it's the length, that last bit of the statement that you're objecting to.
Yes.
And so the idea being that because we have employees that, you know, maybe they may be employees, they may be members of the community, and they may interact or have interactions with students outside of their normal capacity as a school district employee or a coach. But they may also just be, you know, a person or a parent that happens to encounter a student in their private capacity. And we wanted to, the language in here is, you know, if it's reasonable that somebody would perceive that somebody's acting in their professional capacity, in their capacity as a coach, if it's reasonable to think that that's the capacity they're acting in, then they have to be held to the standard that we would expect of employees in their interactions.
Would it be, and Dana, now that I have you explaining, would it be fair to say that maybe under different circumstances, there's possibly a different board policy that would be more specific to this? And the only reason why I bring this up, I know, like, even during like sexual harassment and for managers and supervisors when they're doing this training, there's this huge thing of, you know, what's perceived, and really that's really hard to even justify in a court of law. Like, I'm just trying to make sense why that language would be put in the way that it is.
So originally, there wasn't, the language was even more vague. And so this is just trying to be more specific, that it applies, not just like say during the normal school day, but like I said, if the student were to, if this interaction were to occur off campus, some other part of the school day, we just need, I guess the point is that, abuses can happen, abuses of power, where the adult has, where a student, senses or seems that the adult is in some capacity as the authority, may have further opportunity to abuse that relationship. So we just need our employees to be cognizant of the fact that even though it may be like on the weekend or something, if they're involved in an interaction with a student, that still could be, could fall under this policy if what they're doing with that student then violates one of these other parts of the policy that's an inappropriate activity.
Okay.
So
I think it's just a reminder that our employees cannot shed the patina of being our employees and the roles they perform in our schools just because it's outside of the school day and outside of the school site.
Well, I'm going to suggest that our policy would cover bad interactions by employees anyway, but this weird like third-party observer thing just muddles the whole deal, in my opinion. So I just
excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you, David. Having had a lot of experience around these kind of things while I was at the college and being the ombudsperson, very often the student may not recognize the fact that that a teacher or school employee is behaving inappropriately. The attention might be misinterpreted, and again, if a reasonable person witnesses what appears to be inappropriate behavior between an adult that exercises some form of power over the student, it's almost like reporting any other kind of sexual harassment thing. So I understand it. I understand how difficult it might be, but if we're using a reasonable person as the perception as the rule, I understand the policy.
I do just want to remind everyone, it did go to policy committee. Before it went to policy committee, it did go to legal for review. Dana worked with legal on it, and it is coming to you. It was a first read at the last board meeting, and it's coming for action tonight.
And with that, I'm going to ask for an extension for the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Elba Gonzalez Mares first, and then second, Joe Shunk. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Nays? Abstention? Motion carries. Okay, so we are back on these on the board policy. So do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve this item.
Second.
Second.
Okay, Jose Hurtado and Elba Gonzalez Mares.
That was Cindy.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Cindy. Do I have any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments for this item, President Martin.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Nays?
Nay.
David Gracia, nay. Abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Okay, J4, instructional services. J4A, approval of purchase of unique learning system.
So I had some questions on this item as well. How is this different from the following item, the IXL? and who will be the user of this program? Because it seems like we have a lot of things that are very similar. And so I just want to be really clear how IXL and Unique are different from each other, because they seem to be doing the same thing. And so why do we need both? And how do IXL and Unique interact?
Good evening, Trustee Gracia. I'm going to have Terry Lynn Rossetti, who's the Special Ed Executive Director of Special Ed, discuss the difference between the two and how they meet the needs of our students with IEPs. So I think Ms. Ruiz has unmuted her mic. So Terry Lynn?
Good evening. So the Unique Learning System is targeted towards our students with moderate to severe disabilities. And it is a curriculum system that ties all areas of the curriculum to the core standards for these specific students. It does allow for us to assign assignments that students can interact with both in the classroom as well as in the homes. The IXL system is targeted for our students with mild to moderate disabilities. And it targets the areas of English language arts and mathematics and allows us to take data on specific skills as students are developing them. It too does allow us to have lessons in the classroom and at home.
And I want to say that in the difference is that these programs are, I believe, K-12. And we currently don't have something that's comparable for our general education, gen ed students.
So there's no program that the general population of students can utilize that's similar to this, and this is only for SPED?
These programs were targeted for special education because we can tie them to IEP goals and track skill development that is in alignment with the IEP goals.
Do we need some sort of broader program like this for the entire district?
I believe, yes, we are actually looking at some broader programs, but when we're looking at a purchase for the entire district or looking at programs that would meet the needs K-12, it will be a relatively expensive purchase, and we want to make sure that we do our due diligence and fully investigate it and do some pilots first. This particular program is very specific. These two programs are very specific for SPED needs and addressing the needs of our students with IEPs currently, and especially if we look at the possibility or the likelihood of some kind of distance learning for the fall. Our students with IEPs were probably one of the more challenging groups to meet their needs during distance learning, and this will provide us an online tool for that. That's outside of the regular curriculum that may not meet their specific needs.
Okay.
And it's being funded through special ed. It says it's being funded through special ed, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
I'll move to approve then.
Second.
I have a first by David Gracia, second by Miss Cindy Water. Do I have public comment on this item?
There are no public comments for this item, President Martin.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Nays? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. J4B, approval of purchase of IXL Learning.
So moved.
Second.
First by Mr. David Gracia, second by Elba Gonzalez Mares. Do I have any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments for this item, President Martin.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Motion carries. J4C, MOU between NVUSD and Napa County Office of Education and COE for prevention, health, and wellness grants work.
So moved.
Second.
Got a comment on this one. Again, This is the second time I've seen this thing. And last year I made the comment that we were only targeting 4 middle schools to receive the anti-vaping presentation, but we have 5 in the district. So my comment is the same as last year. Can we not get all 5 middle schools in our district to have this anti-vaping presentation?
I believe the language was at least 4 4 school presentations. I'll have to go back and double check, but I think that we absolutely can get 5. I will follow up with the county if my reading is not correct, around at least 4 presentations.
Okay.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve this item.
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did have hosts Joe Shunk and Cindy Water approve this. Do I have public comment on this item?
There are no public comments for this item, President Martin.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Okay, motion carries. J4D pair deck agreement to purchase.
So I had a question on this. How is this different from what we already use Google Classroom and Aries to do?
So I love Pear Deck. Pear Deck is a Google app that it goes back to one of the concerns we had around, or one of the some of the feedback we got from students and teachers was that some of the distance learning wasn't as engaging as it could be when you're doing presentations through either a Google slide presentation or doing lessons through a Google slide presentation. And Pear Deck allows for teachers to build in surveys into their Google slide presentations or into their videos in a Google slide presentation. It allows for there to be surveys, animation, and different tools that allow for students to respond throughout the presentation to increase the amount of engagement, so students aren't just sitting there watching the slide presentation or watching the lesson, that they can actually do things in real time. Little charts will pop up and students can draw on the, and add their responses and see their classmates' responses. So it does provide another tool for distance learning to engage students.
That sounds really good. All right, I'll move to approve.
Second.
Okay, first by Mr. David Gracia, second by Mr. Joe Shunk. Do I have public comment on this item?
There are no public comments for this item, President Martin.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Nays? Abstentions? Okay, motion carries. J5, school planning and construction. J5A, request for 12 additional months of VPCS under contract to provide program and project management services.
So moved.
Second.
A first by David Gracia, a second by Mr. Joe Shunk. Do I have any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments for this item, President Martin.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstention? Motion carries. Okay, J5B, SPC 16.25-17, request for contract with M&M Project Inspection for Inspector of Record Services at Fencing Phase 2 campuses.
So moved.
Second.
A first by David Gracia, a second by Joe Shunk. Do I have any public comment?
There are no public comments for this item, President Martin.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Nays? Abstention? Motion carries. Okay, J5C, SBC 15.46-17, award of contract for finishing kitchen modernization project at Alta Heights Elementary School and Canyon Oaks Elementary School to GMH Builders, Inc.
So moved.
Second.
So a first by Mr. David Gracia, second by Mr. Joe Shunk. Public comment on this item, Manny?
There are no public comments for this item, President Martin.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? Motion. J5D, SPC 7.9-20, request for design services by ATI Architects.
So moved.
Second. So I have a first by Mr. David Gracia, second by Jose Hurtado. Any public comment?
There are no public comments for this item, President Martin.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Nays? Abstentions? Okay, motion carries. J5E, SPC 18.14-20, contract with Craig Flores for Inspector of Record Services at Northwood Campus Modernization Project Action Item. Excuse me, I kept going.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, a first by David Gracia, second by Joe Shunk. Any public comments on this item?
There are no public comments for this item, President Martin.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Nays, abstentions? Motion carries. J5C, or excuse me, J5F, SPC 3.2-20, request for 12 additional months under contract with Fry's Consulting to provide project management services.
So moved.
Second.
The first by David Gracia, second by Mr. Joe Shunk. Any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments for this item, President Martin.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstention, motion carries. J5G, SPC 18.13-20, contract with J. Leininger for Inspector of Record Services at Finishing Kitchen Phase 3.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, a first by David Gracia, second by Joe Shunk. Any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments for this item, President Martin.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstention. Okay, motion carries. J5H, pre-qualified design build teams to move forward in the selection process at the American Canyon Middle School new multipurpose project.
So moved.
Second.
First by David Gracia, second by Mr. Joe Shunk. Do I have any public comment?
There are no public comments for this item, President Martin.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Nays, abstentions, motion carries. J5I, SPC 1.1-21, contract with King Consulting.
So moved.
Second.
I have a first by David Gracia, second by Joe Shunk. Any public comment on these items?
There are no public comment for this item, President Martin.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions, motion carries. We now move to K for informational. Items under this section do not require board action. So K1, business and operations, K1A, NVUSD short-term credit rating improved to highest rating possible. Woohoo! So the Napa Valley Unified School District is in the process of issuing $37.4 million of tax revenue anticipated notes to meet short-term cash flow needs. As part of this process, S&P Global conducted an analysis of NVUSD credit. NVUSD received the highest short-term rating possible, which is SP. What is that rating? -1 or +1? I'm not.
It is SP-1+.
-1. Okay, 1+. Perfect. So what does this mean, Rob? Can you please explain to the public, just briefly?
Absolutely, I can tell you what it means. So then whenever you issue debt, part of the process is to determine a credit rating. and what happens is you hire companies like S&P to evaluate your finances for credit worthiness and your ability to pay that money back. And so just to kind of to paint a picture of what happened historically, if we were to just go back in time, just 1 year ago, when we went to issue our tax revenue anticipation note about a year ago, we were recently downgraded a little bit before the issuance. And when we went to issue our last tax revenue anticipation note, we were about ready to be downgraded again. And so what we ended up doing is we actually pulled the credit rating and we issued a private placement. So the big picture is that the work and all the hard decisions that we've done as a team, the management team, the board, in terms of kind of right sizing the district, the market, or a term that people use, the market or the stock market, recognizes all of that hard work and recognizes that we're moving in the correct direction. And as a result, we were given the highest credit rating possible for the tax revenue anticipation note. So what does this mean to our program and our taxpayers? It means that we pay a lower interest rate now that our credit rating and the work that we're doing is moving into the right direction. And so to put it into perspective, the last issuance that we did, the interest rate with costs was around 2%. The one that we just recently did was, it was issued close to about 0.9%. And so just doing math based on that, you can see it has saved us substantial money. Part of it is also due to just market conditions. You know, interest rates are lower, so it's not 100% due to the fact that the work that we're doing, but it definitely has a strong role. So again, hard work, we're doing all the hard work, we're moving in the right direction. Ultimately, what it means is it means more money for programs.
Well, congratulations to you and your team.
I do want to make a quick connection. So to our presentation earlier by True North and Tramatola, we talked about the importance of sort of the trustworthiness, and I do believe it's progress indicators like this, goal 4 of the strategic plan, that will start to build that trustworthiness around fiscal stewardship. So thank you to the business office and for all your leadership around the engagement with the creditors. And then of course, thank you to the board for the tough decisions that it took to be able to put the actions in front of the creditors to increase our rating in this very favorable direction. So
thank you.
Just want to take a minute to highlight the good work that Dr. Massetti, Rob, and our interim CEO, Paul, did in getting this thing turned around. We went from having potentially a downgrade to now having the highest rating possible in a very short period of time. So I think it's just important to recognize the strong work that was accomplished by the district here.
Yes, bravo.
Thank you. Couldn't do it without you. Thank you.
For your entire team, Rosanna. These are those mini celebrations we have to take advantage of. All right, we move to L, Board Representative Reports. So L1, Curriculum and Student Support Committee. You guys did not meet, correct? Okay, L2, Facilities and Technology Committee did not meet.
No, we did.
Oh, you did? Sorry. Oh, sorry. Yes.
We received an update on the data center upgrade, which is progressing nicely, but slightly slower than anticipated. We learned that the business office has been working with vendors to secure concessions in light of the 10% budget cut in the governor's budget. Webcams are being installed on Promethean boards so the classes can communicate with each other. NVLA is getting Promethean boards installed over the summer, and the computer lab at Canyon Oaks is being removed. Fiber upgrade is being worked on throughout the district with a targeted completion date of early 2021, and we're getting ready to move into phase 3 on the security camera project. With regard to the facilities, we reviewed the use of contingency both on the developer side and the district side of a contract, and we talked about the discussion that goes on when a developer contingency gets used versus when a district contingency gets used. In the end, any unspent contingency comes back to the district, but there are still different rationales surrounding when a certain contingency gets used. We also highlighted a few of the types of things we could expect to see in the fall, most likely doing with change orders stemming from summer construction on things like fencing, finishing kitchens, Napa Junction, the fields, and various roofing projects. And that concludes the facilities and technology.
Okay, thank you. Finance Committee.
Well, I have to say that Rob has done a great job of going over everything that we discussed at the Finance Committee. So anything that I have to say now is going to be very repetitive. So I will say this. A school district budget is more than just numbers. It's a roadmap for success. It is a record of our district's past decisions and a spending plan for our future. Our budget directly connects our financial decisions to our goals for our students. So this is really important. The critical work that has been done to date has allowed us in very uncertain times to be able to focus on our strategic goals. So while I could reiterate everything that we've always gone over, I guess I want to say there's a bigger picture to all of this, and all of this good work that is being done well positions us to be effective in some very difficult times ahead. So my hat's off to the business office and to Dr. Massetti. Thank you. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Robin. Policy Committee will be meeting in July, is that correct?
Yes, July 14th.
July 14th. Okay. L5, Special Education.
Have not met.
Okay. City of American Canyon Liaison Representatives will be meeting in July. City of Napa Liaison Representatives. Cindy or Robin?
No meeting.
Okay. In July, I'm assuming?
Yes, July, but Yountville and Napa both July.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. All right, we move to additional suggestions and comments from board members and superintendent.
So I have a couple. I would like to suggest when we're implementing new academic programs that we have a bit of maybe presentation or better explanation of why those programs are an improvement over what we presently have and who is going to benefit from them. I feel like this could be a great way to get us talking more about student achievement at board meetings, since the CSBA says the more we talk about student achievement at board meetings, the more likely we are to have successful programs.
Okay. Any additional comments?
Yes. Read this book, which is it backwards?
No.
Okay.
How the South Won the Civil War.
Yes, it looks backwards to me. How the South Won the Civil War by Heather Cox Richardson. And it explodes a lot of myths, including the independent Wild West, which enjoyed serious government subsidies, while it was getting established. And excellent read for a high school student. It's about 204 pages.
Thank you, Ms. Water.
Thank you, Cindy. My suggestion, and I'm just taking note of time, it is 11. I know we had a discussion about possibly going back into closed session for an evaluation. I really, I'm reading faces and I'm feeling a little overwhelmed right now, and I really want to give Rosanna an evaluation that she really deserves, and I don't think that 10 pages worth of evaluation would give you justice. I'd rather us be nice, fresh, and maybe a separate meeting so we can really give you what you deserve, a justified evaluation.
I'll have Ms. Morales reach out, or we'll coordinate tomorrow. We'll get a message out to try and schedule a separate closed session just focused on superintendent evaluation. So
yeah, even if it's scheduled during the day, I think we can work that out. So
okay. We'll reach out to you tomorrow, to the trustees tomorrow.
Sounds good. I just have some announcements. I'm going back to school, so I'll be going to UC Davis, even though it's continuation, but I think I'm copying Miss Massetti over here. I am starting a new chapter. I will be putting the brakes on my business, and I will be, I'll be the new HR manager for Ragushi Vineyard Management and Winery here in the Valley. So I'll be starting school too because of the learning curve. So I am really, really happy for that opportunity. So I just hope everyone's a little patient because it's been a long time since I've been back to school. I mean, I do a lot of continuing education, but this one's definitely going to kick my butt. So we'll see.
That's good.
Yeah. So thank you so much, everybody.
Lifelong learning.
Yes, most definite. All right. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Future agenda items,
Future agenda items, sorry.
because I had a couple, so that's why I wanted to.
Oh, okay, because I thought you were done with the implementing academic. Okay, go ahead.
No, so I have some concerns about some of the items that we did approve tonight in the area of programs we're purchasing for use in the district. I would like to see a presentation on the creation of a high-quality blended learning suite that will be offered district-wide at all schools. I dislike the idea of piecemeal cobbling together little bits of various systems in order to get a serviceable product. I would describe our current district-wide implementation as fractured at best. Seems like we need to identify a few strong performing programs and make them available to everyone. To that end, I would like to hear about the implementation plan of any of the programs that we approved tonight that are new, and I would also like to hear how programs for a comprehensive blended learning suite might be identified and then implemented. As a separate topic, I would also like to see a presentation on the student assessment process and tools available currently to teachers, and whether they are adequate or need improvement, and what that improvement might look like.
I've noted it, and I'll log it in our future agenda items.
Okay. Any other items? Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Elba Gonzalez Mares, and a second by David Gracia. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Nays, abstention. We are adjourned. Have a great evening, everyone.
Our last,
Congratulations.
our last board meeting of 2019-2020, so I just needed to say.
We're alive!
Well done, team.
Yes.
It's been so crazy.
Right.
It's just.
I think we're hanging on a thread, but we made it. To be honest.
All right, I just had to.
Congratulations, everyone. Have a great summer break, whatever that looks like, but please enjoy it.
Okay. Adios.
Bye.
Bye. Good night.